Give everybody about 2 more minutes. So be thinking when you introduce yourself, I want you to tell us what Santa brought you for Christmas and your favorite educational program in your LEA. 30 seconds. And we are recording this, so be on your best behavior. No, just for future reference. So, all right. Push it over for you if you want.
You just give me 10 minutes, right?
That's right. That's right.
10
minutes plus 50. No, nobody will complain if we send them home early. But well, good. Well, welcome. We appreciate all of you being here, both in person and virtually. If those of you virtually have any issues hearing, please let us know.
So unmute.
Do try and put your microphones on mute when you're not speaking, but you can use the hand raise function on the top right within Teams if you need to, or you can throw a message in chat and I'll try to be watching that so we can address any questions as they come up. And we do want this to be collaborative, and please ask any questions you have as they come up. We want it to be as helpful for you as it can be. But yeah, again, thank you for being here. Sam Uri is my name. School Finance Director is my title. I come from being a charter school business administrator at Carl G. Mazur Preparatory Academy and Franklin Discovery Academy as well. Most recently. But let's see. So I said we had to, for those of you that just joined, as we introduce ourselves, I want to know what Santa brought you and your favorite educational program in your LEA. So I'm not adding LEA, so I won't share that, but Santa brought me a ski rack for our Toyota Sequoia, so that I don't get the back of my wife's car dirty when we go up to Brighton to go skiing. So I haven't even put it on yet, but that's what Santa brought me. So. And then we'll go to my right here. Brett, you want to just introduce yourself quickly and then keep going.
I won't unmute it there. I'm Brett Baltazar, School Finance Manager. And let's see, what did Santa bring me? He brought us floating shelves for our new house. Yeah.
Sweet. My name's Todd Naylor. I am currently at Carl G. Mazur Preparatory. I filled in for Sam.
Poor guy. Sorry about that.
For Christmas, Santa brought me some wireless headphones. And Mazur has a Japanese course, which I think is pretty cool.
Chris Hatch. at Franklin Discovery Academy. Another one of Sam's replacements. So Santa brought mostly stuff for the kids, but I guess I got shrimp and crab for dinner, so that was good. Franklin Discovery model, pretty unique. I like the variety, but probably my favorite part is what I call the engaged classes, and their project-based learning, hands-on classes that the kids get to go to.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Ryan Gibbons. I am with Paradigm Schools and a mini fridge so I can eat healthier at work this year. We have, I really like our seminar classes. It's a 2-period class that all students take that study Greek literature and have discussion. History is kind of an interdisciplinary class. It's really the core of our curriculum. And
Does that mix their English and history credits together? We at Mazer they do that, and they call it Socratic seminars.
yeah.
Yep, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks, Noreen. And how long have you been a BA, Noreen?
I started September 1st.
Okay, great. Welcome. Corey.
I'm Corey Holio, Newell School District. Just started in November training. Santa, me and my wife just got a new house, so really we just got a bunch of furniture. And because of everything, being delayed, it's just getting delivered today actually. So that's pretty. As far as favorite educational program, honestly, I don't have one yet. I'm still trying to keep my head above water. So.
All right.
Irel Pemberton at San Juan School District. Santa brought my wife and I an air fryer. And I'm a little biased. I was a CTE educator, so I would say CTE programs are
Fellow former CTE educator myself. Okay.
I'm Cole Shakespeare. I'm a fiscal monitor program manager here at USBD. I'll be a little biased. I kind of like the SPED program. That's where I came from the last 4 years. Santa brought me some new binoculars. So, nice.
Hey everyone, I'm Smriti Dakal. I'm the Financial Compliance Auditor at the State Charter School Board. And I've been at my position since last 14 months, and it's been an awesome journey. Regarding what I got as a gift from Santa, Santa gave me lots of snow. Myself warm. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And then we'll start with you folks that are with us virtually. So I'm just going to look at the ones I can see on the screen. You folks that joined us from Nebo, Jesse, and I think it's Michael. Jesse, will you unmute and tell us?
Ooh, I have 3 kids, so for Christmas, I just thought of the children. And I would actually also go with special ed. I love helping out those kids as far as a favorite program.
Jesse, for joining us. Okay, and Michael, also from Nebo. Can you unmute there, Michael, or if he's in your office, Jesse, maybe you can just talk into your microphone.
Yeah, he's in the office next door. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure if there's an issue with his microphone or not.
We'll come back to Michael. No problem at all. Sherry, if you can hear us, can you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, I'm Sherry Harper from Box Elder School District. I'm actually the new accountant, but we'll also be getting a new BA this year because Rob Cook is retiring at the end of the year. So I'm just listening in, trying to learn as much as I can. to help me and to help the new BA when he comes. So, or she, whichever. Santa brought me and my husband a new smart TV. And I'd have to say my favorite program is also SPED Ed. I have a special needs granddaughter, so that always holds a special place in my heart. That's it.
Thank you, Sherry. Thanks for being here. Marcy, can you hear us? And
I'm here. Yeah.
Great.
I don't know. I'm from North Summit. I just started in July, and oh man. What did Santa bring me? I don't know. I think we got a new TV, 75 inches, so that. And clothes. I like clothes, so that's what he brought me. And my favorite program, I don't know. We have a really great CTE program, a really great FFA program, but I'm kind of biased to the English teacher. He is my husband, but he does a good job, the 9th grade English teacher. So anyway, that's me.
Hey, thank you, Marcy. Appreciate it. Okay, Tyler, can you introduce yourself? You're unmuted, but we don't hear you. There we go. We can hear you, Tyler.
Can you hear me now?
Tyler. Yep.
I'm Tyler Newton, Wayne School District. I've been a BA for 2 years now, which should tell you something about the complexity of this job, why I'm still on a new BA training. Santa brought me everything I wrapped for myself, which was mostly new socks. And my favorite program is preschool, because I just love watching those little kids start to learn.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. Jake, I don't think we've gotten to you yet.
I'm Jake Hill. I've been a BA for 1.5 years now. My favorite programs are the ones that run in the positive and not the negative. And I also got a TV for Christmas.
Hey. Thanks, Jake. We appreciate you being here. Tammy from North San Pete. Can you introduce yourself as well?
I have, and I hope you can hear me. Again, I'm Tammy Jorgensen from North San Pete School District. I officially have just taken over as of January 3rd. So definitely I'm feeling overwhelmed and in the dark. I'm hoping to learn a lot today. Santa this year did not bring me any gifts. The gifts that I received this year was spending time with family and sharing each other's love. So that was my gift, greatest of all. As far as programs, I agree with Tyler. I have a special place in my heart for the preschool program, and I'm anxious to see where the new direction is headed for preschool and the opportunities that possibly we're going to have here in the future for those new learners.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. Did I miss anybody that's a BA? We have some staff on there, and in the interest of time, although I haven't asked Scott Jones, our Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, what Santa brought him. So if he can unmute and tell us what Santa brought him and what his favorite program is.
Well, you know, since I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Santa brought me a big old lump of coal, right? Just put it right in my stocking. No, I'm just kidding. So we had a great Christmas. You know, I echo the sentiments of the prior person that said, you know, it was an opportunity to spend time with family. I mean, I know we've all been impacted pretty hard by COVID, and so, you know, it was different this year. We didn't have everybody all together at one time. We kind of spent time visiting and, you know, keeping loose to it. So that was great. My kids are all grown now, so they had presents under the tree and stuff, so it was really good. And then what was the other question, Sam? I need to answer.
Just your favorite educational program.
What's my favorite educational program?
Yeah.
Yeah, special education. I just think it's a phenomenal program that is there for the benefit of kids, and I just really feel that that's my my favorite program. So I appreciate everybody asking. So.
Thank you, Superintendent Jones. We appreciate it. And I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson as well to hop on for a second, if she would tell us what Santa brought her in her favorite program.
What did Santa bring me? He brought me, he gave me a trip to Indiana to spend with my grandbaby, my one and only grandbaby. So that was perfect. My favorite program is also special education. I was lucky enough to spend 21 years at the Deaf and Blind School. So I'm a little biased in that way. So there you have it.
Okay, well, thanks. All right, and they'll, oops, sorry, I muted myself. They'll be with us today to correct me if I say anything. Brett's here too to correct me, but we're excited for our presenters today. So just a quick rundown through the agenda. Brett will present on financial reporting and UPEPS 101 for about an hour. Afterwards, Cole Shakespeare and Neil Stevens from the special ed team will present to us for about a half an hour. Take a break, and then Del Frost will join us on MSP 101. Afterwards, Rebecca Nielsen will join us on Utah grants, and then we'll kind of have a half an hour at that point. One of you asked for some examples of monthly board financial reports, and just some time to share best practices, share how you all keep organized, or answer questions, and request for future training that you might have. So keep those in mind, and we're excited to have you all here. So without further ado, we'll turn the time over here to Brett, and he's going to present here on the Teams screen, as well as we'll be able to see it on the TV. So let me share it.
There you go.
Can you all see that okay on the TV?
You see that? All right. So first off, I just want to let you guys know this is informal. So if you have questions, ask them. If I don't know the answer, I'll pass it on to Sam. And I mean, I just want you guys to be able to feel comfortable asking questions, because if you have a question, most likely someone else out there has the same question. So I'm just trying to be here to help you guys. A lot of this, those that have been here over a year, maybe longer, may know some of this stuff. So it's just kind of at that point that I brought the training to the point as if someone were brand new. Some helpful, some might not be, but just kind of bear with me on this. Screen is blank.
Go right there and do page by page.
Let's see what it does. It goes blank. Wonder what that one. Just a second.
Somebody's in the lobby. Okay. Actually, if you push admit, I think it'll let you. Yeah. She may be having some connection issues or something. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So the discussion items I'm going to cover today is first, I want my team's not here today. They're all virtually, but I want to at least introduce you to them. And I'll be sending out a document later that kind of shows which of my team members are over which LEAs. Because there's 160 plus LEAs, we have it kind of divided, so one person's over the LEA, and you can kind of filter the questions through them, and they can get familiar with you, and they can get better. They know better your reporting than other LEAs, and so they get familiar with that part of it. But I'm going to discuss team members. Second, duties of a business official, and then third is the financial reports. Fourth is chart of accounts. Fifth is the Utah Public Education Financial System, or UPEFs, and then deadlines and due dates. That's kind of a big part, is the deadlines and due dates that are for my team. And then also I'm going to provide some helpful codes and resources. So on my team, I have John Palmer, Laura Wilson, and Dallin Pinier. All of these are school finance specialists. I have their information. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be sending out a document to show which LEAs they oversee in relation to reporting. And then at the bottom, I have our team's email. This goes to my whole team. And typically when we have documents that you have to send to us, that's where I would like to have them sent. It's not mandatory, but it does make it easier. So if someone's out, they can get access to that email and record it and report that we received the information that we needed. If someone else is out, if the person over your LEA is out of the office. So just kind of get familiar with that. A lot of it is in relation to indirect cost material that we request, and your financial reports your audit reports that are due in November. But you can ask that, go to that email and ask any question. Then if we don't know the answer, we'll get you to the right person. Topic is the duties of a business official. So for a business administrator at a school district, here is a good reference of what you should be doing and your responsibilities. And a lot of that stuff is very important. A lot of it does carry over to the business official at a charter school. It's just dependent on what your actual role is. I know the roles at a charter school vary than what a district does, but there's always going to be someone that is the business official, whether it's a different title or not. But this 53G 4303 basically states that you need to attend board meetings and keep accurate records of the proceedings. You're the custodian of the funds received and dispersed as the BA, and that you can countersign with board chair on warrants or claims against the district. You are required to prepare financial reports to the board each month, and I believe Sam's going to go over some of those examples of what the reports look like. You're to follow Budget Procedures Act in 63J in the state code, ensure compliance with GAAP. Also assist the superintendent with budget, statistical, and fiscal reports. I think it's kind of important that it says assist when I believe most of the BAs are actually doing a lot of that work and sharing that with the superintendent. But the superintendent and the BA are hand in hand in a lot of that stuff. You should ensure adequate internal controls are in place to safeguard the district's funds. And then you also perform other duties as assigned by the superintendent. For charter school business officials, that's in 53G5 Part 4. But it's like I mentioned, it's very similar responsibilities as the BA at a district. It just may vary a little bit here and there depending on what your role is. Going into financial reports. So USBE is to determine the following based on State Code 53E. The minimum reporting requirements are met, and also reports are properly submitted. So there are times where we get reports and we ask the LEA to resubmit or adjust something in their reports because it doesn't meet the standards of what's needed and what's required for those reports. And so that's kind of our role, is that we're reviewing those reports that you submit to us, whether it be the financial audit reports or UPEFs, those budgets, we're reviewing a lot of that data. And also within the reports, you're to utilize GAAP and GASB financial reporting requirements as part of your framework. GASB is fairly new for the charter school world. They've always followed FASB, and I believe it was last year, the year before, that became a state requirement that any LEAs that report to us are to use GASB. And that just simplifies the whole process for us. There has been a major change in their financial statements for several charter schools. Some saw minimal change, some saw a lot of changes in how they were reporting their financial statements. But if you have questions on GASB and where to get resources, please reach out. I can help you get the information or send you in the right direction for you to review your framework against what GASB and GAAP require. 3G 4-4 the financial reports should follow fund accounting and program accounting. And I'll go into a little bit later what program accounting is, but it also, and that's where I mentioned down here in R277113, those are other accounting requirements found in the administrative rule on what we expect the reports to look like. So just to give you an example what GAAP is, if you don't know, that stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standard Board. Some of the financial reports are listed below. In UPEFs, we'll receive the following. We'll receive the budgets, and that's both original and or final. Final is not required, but highly recommended that you submit, because that kind of trues up anything that may have come across that you weren't expecting at the beginning of the year. Last few years is a great example. All the COVID funding that you guys have received, that's a huge increase. You may not have expected that at the beginning of the year. So that final budget, it also allows for that. So you have an original and final budget. And I'll kind of go over the due dates and deadlines of these reports at a later time, but I kind of wanted to get them listed out here first. This second one is the annual financial report, or the AFR. So if you hear us talking about the AFR or APR, I know APR has other meanings, and so, but in the government world sense, or here at USB, that's in relation to the annual program report and not the rate that you're getting on your car. Then we have the school level report, and that's generated from the submissions that you guys provide us. And then we have a deferred or unearned revenue report, an indirect cost tool data, and the school fees report. So if you kind of look at those asterisks that I put at the bottom, you'll kind of know that those last three I kind of mentioned, they're on an as applicable basis. Not all LEAs have deferred revenue, or not all LEAs want to participate in indirect cost. Those two reports are a little different, and I'll go into those a little bit more detail later. But the school fees report actually generates from other reports that you send us, so you don't have to worry about submitting anything for that. Just know that there's a report that generates from the data you submit. And then, so those are the reports within UPEFs that we collect at this time. The reports that we collect via email or that school finance email that I provided earlier, I also have it here listed, is the financial reports, your audit reports, your ACFR, which was formerly the CAFR, now it's ACFR, or your annual comprehensive financial report, or your financial statements. A lot of charter schools don't do the ACFR, they just do the financial statements. And then audit as applicable, and then all compliance reports and management letters. Typically, your auditors are aware of what needs to be submitted, and they provide that to us. But we'll reach out and let you know, hey, we didn't get your management letter. We noticed that there were findings. Can you provide us that management letter so we have that official response of what the LEA is working on if there's findings. And also through email is indirect cost organizational chart and any supplementary information as requested. And I'll go into a little bit more into indirect cost stuff. Any questions up to this point on reports? You guys know everything? Perfect.
We don't know what to even ask.
This is a little different aspect. I just kind of want to make you aware of what's out there. So transparency, we don't deal with transparency here at USB, but it is a requirement by the state. And the state auditor's office oversees a lot of that reporting. So I get a lot of questions about, well, my transparency is not uploading correctly. And I can help with some things, but I don't know your systems, and I don't work with transparency. But I provided some links here to help you get answers to those questions. I can send you to the right individual that's over transparency and provide that to you. But it's not something that we work with here as of right now. It's not saying that we won't in the future, but I know it's a lot of redundancy in reporting, but it is what it is right now until we work closer with the state auditors for something else. Also, to the state auditor's office, you're required to submit your financial reports. So the same thing that your auditor sends us on the state auditor's website, there is a link where you can upload reports, and that's where you would upload them on their site. And a lot of that contains your budgets, your certifications, fraud risk assessments, school outlay reports, and other reports that they require. Those are the ones that I'm familiar with. This is not an extensive list of what's required, but just to kind of give you a heads up, the state auditor's office does require other information besides what we have. One thing that I wanted to mention that I'm kind of talking about the state auditors is that we, in compliance with what we do here at USBE with state programs, we do have a state compliance audit guide out there. Your auditors use that as a guidance on when they come out and review programs at the state level. So if you have a chance, go to this resources forms manual guide section and search for the state compliance audit guide. Here we kind of use the acronym SCAG. It's probably not the cleanest one, but it's what the acronym is, and we use that here. And LEAs call quite often asking, well, in relation to this program, what should I be doing? And that audit guide gives a lot of information, and it's very helpful for you guys to understand, so you're ready when your auditors come out and they use that as a guide to audit your state programs.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you look at prior years too, I mean, it gives you a really good guide for how you should be administering all your programs, right? They might pick 3 programs in a year. The last couple of years, they've looked at Teacher and Student Success Act funds, the TSSA funds, and they may not look at that this year, but it gives you a good guide of the kinds of time and effort and documentation you should have on all of your programs, right? But,
Perfect. Questions on that? Nothing. Anything in the chats?
I don't see anything on the chats. Just, I guess another thing I'd add is, what happens, Brett, if they're late on transparency?
You get a nasty letter from the state auditor's office when you're late, and also we get notified. So you'll get notified that they may begin withholding from your LEA. Get notified because the funds come through us. We also get notified at our level of submitting their transparency in time, and they're constantly late. The state auditor's office is pretty strict on that. Work with them and get to know them, so when you do have to submit, it's easier. It's an easier process. But yeah, be aware that if you're not submitting the even transparency and or the financial reports in a timely manner, from them saying that they are going to start withholding funds.
Hey, Brett, can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
This is Jake from South Sanpete, but is there still any talk? Because I think there was some talk before about possibly they could ask you for that information, so BAs aren't uploading the same information to the same thing to multiple agencies.
Great question. We are working on USIMS, and that's kind of an overall encompassing system where a lot of that data will be coming. We're not quite there yet, and Scott or Deborah may have better knowledge than me as to where we're at on that process, but that's been something that's been discussed. It's not official that we're going that route, but I think that's something they're looking at.
Yeah, I can speak to that too. We are working on that with our IT folks, and but it, just to be realistic, it may take a few years till it's fully operational there. So we're working hard on that, but we actually do have some BAs that are on that work group, trying to help our IT folks make sure we have all the components that we need. But
and you had a question about how often?
Yeah, so right when I came in, transparency was due, so I did that. Is that an annual thing or a quarterly thing?
Yeah, good question. So the revenues and expenditures is quarterly. So 4 times a year for your revenues.
Quarterly financials, and that one's next week, right?
Yeah, it would be due the end of January, right?
Oh, it's not October, so one.
Yeah. So transparency is always a month after the end of the quarter. Your yearly stuff, just make sure that you have the fraud risk assessment in the as soon as you get your financial reports, upload those. Upload your budgets as soon as you can after they're adopted by your board. The financial certification is something that your board CFO and your board chair will sign, certifying the financial reports. School capital outlay report, even if you don't have any, that reports anything over $2 million. Even if you don't have anything, fill it out and upload it, just so state auditor checks you off. They've been really pretty good about Brooke Russell in their office has been really good about following up recently, but just if you can stay off of her list, that is the ideal there. So and if you do have some crazy issue with your system or something's going on, reach out to them proactively, as well as us, just so that we know we much as we can. But if heaven forbid somebody leaves the country abruptly or gets hit by a bus, and sorry if I'm being morbid there, but uh, you know, keep us posted if anything comes up so that we can, you know, out in whichever way we can. But yeah, uh, keep up with that. And quarterly is the revenue and expenditure data. And then you'll have a yearly payroll transparency that's due as well once a year. So
I came on in September, so I had to do all of those with no context.
Like, I just kind of want to reiterate what Sam said. If you feel like you're not going to meet, and this is more for either for transparency or our side of reporting, if you feel like you're going to be late or you're having issues, I'd rather know ahead of time than after the due date. So if you come across something and you feel like you're going to struggle with it and be late, reach out to us and let us know. Give us a heads up. I'd rather know ahead of time that we're going to expect an issue with that LEA or with your LEA in reporting than find out after the due date. Oh, well, we're running into this, and this. And now we're going to be a month or two late. I'd rather know ahead of time and help you and be there to provide guidance for you guys. So anything comes up, even if it is the day before the due date, let us know. Hey, I ran into this last minute issue. Just send us a quick email and we'll work with you. I work with you if I don't know there's an issue though. So reach out. Going into the chart of accounts. So R277, this is an administrative rule, requires the LEA to report to USBE following USBE chart of accounts. We are in the process of changing the code or the admin rule just a little bit. Currently, it says that you at the LEA have to use USBE chart of accounts at your level, then report to us. But it's when you're reporting to us that we need you to use USBE chart. So whenever you're uploading into UPES, our financial system, that has to follow the chart of accounts. You don't necessarily need to follow our chart of accounts at your level, but because there are several programs that you may be running at the local level that we don't have here. And so you'll have your own local codes to run that. But in the end, everything that you have in your system does need to be mapped to our chart of accounts. And I'll kind of go into mapping a little bit later when I to UPES. But here I kind of wanted to mention that USBE chart of accounts comprises of the following. The fund code is 2 digits. Function code 4 digits. I know a lot of charters use QuickBooks, and it only allows 2 digits. So that's where a case where for their function code, if you're using function 2400, typically it'll come across as 24, and then you'll map that 24 to our 2400. But I'll get into mapping a little bit later. There's program codes is 4 digits. Location code is 3 digits. Object code is 3 digits, and revenue code is 4 digits. And so that's kind of what I mentioned. An LEA may utilize their own chart of accounts within their financial system, but an LEA must map to a USBE's chart of accounts when reporting to us. And here's a link to USBE's chart of accounts. And then I also put NCES in there, their chart of accounts. That's who we report to at the federal level, and we use their chart of accounts. There is some mapping that we do to their chart of accounts, but we try to follow their chart of accounts as close as possible so that it makes it easier for us when we have to report to the feds. Going on with chart of accounts, it also requires that the LEA to create a policy in relation to program accounting. Establish internal controls in relation to recording program revenue and expenditures. So typically, when you get your monthly allotment from us, you'll see that there's a program and revenue code attached to each one of those. That's how you should be reporting the revenue and expenditures for that program. There's a revenue code and a program code. So revenues and expenditures should follow that same program code all the way through. On our APR, we summarize, which is just that. It's a summary of what happened. We have a lot of groupings going on in our APR, but at your level, you need to be tracking what happens at the program level and not follow what the APR groups together, but rather how you're receiving those funds on the allotment memo. So there's the allotment memo that provides that, and then there's an indirect cost type schedule that is out there that also provides a little bit more detail. It'll provide the name and whether it's what type of indirect cost, whether it's a restricted or unrestricted program. And it also does provide the revenue and program combination there as well. Also, your award letter, when you receive a grant, you should be getting an award letter, and that should also be providing that same information. That's when it comes from USBE. There are several people that receive funds from outside of USBE. If you have questions on how to code that, we do have codes set up designed to track those funds. So let us know if you have questions on it. We can help you. We can look at the chart of accounts with you and provide the best guidance that we have. Questions on that? Before we get into UPEFs. And so in UPEFs, it's a financial reporting system designed to collect financial data as required by regulations, codes, and rules. So we have federal guidance that we have to collect it, and state code says we need to collect it, and our board rules or administrative rules kind of guide us on how we need to collect that. So the next slides are going to cover some of the following, and I'll kind of go through this fairly quick. I think mostly everybody, even that's online, already has an account within UPEFs, but if you don't, here's some helpful guidance on how to register, how to log in, who can register, and what rights are available, which reports are uploads, which reports are manual entries, and how to map your chart of accounts to ours, and then what are code validations. Then I also have a link to UPEFs if you want that. If you don't already have it, I would have it saved as a bookmark somewhere. It's one that you don't get into often, but when you do, in October and January, a lot. So first of all, here's just a screenshot. Go ahead and click on register. There's two different buttons that you can click on to register. And then once you're there, you're going to enter your information. Everything with an asterisk is required. You may choose to add access to specific LEAs or leave that blank. Either way, when we're working with you, we kind of already know which LEAs you're going to be over. Working with a third-party company, a lot of charters work with a business management company. If you're one of those and they need access to your school, you have to get access. We can grant them access, but it has to be from someone at the school giving them the okay to get access to your school. And then, so in here, you can either add an LEA or not. It's up to you. If we already know who you are, then we know which school to assign you already. Once it's filled out, you go ahead and complete the registration. You can choose your own username and your own password. Typically doesn't like spaces in either one of those in your username or password, and also special characters. But if it comes back with an error, just know it's probably a special character is somewhere in there. So once you register, our system automatically sends an email out to you, an email confirmation. And you can actually get into the system without clicking confirm within the email. But I would suggest confirming in the email that you're the one setting up that account, because if you ever forget the password, that never happens. Or if you forget your username, because you're only in the system a few times a year, that happens quite often. But if you confirm the email when you first register, then you can go in and if you forget your password or email, you can have the system automatically send you a link to reset it or remind you what your password is. That's what that is. And we also, if you never did confirm the email and you need to reset your password or forgot your username, you can actually, in this system, we do have that resend confirmation email in there. So you can have that confirmation resent and access your information that way. You can register. Anyone can register to access the reports in UPass. It's a public site. Anybody, legislators have access. Whoever wants to have access to these reports can, but it's when you're uploading and certifying the data. The only data they'll ever see is certified data. So they won't see it if it's only uploaded and it's never been certified. All financial reports are public, including the reports in UPass. Different rights are granted to individuals based on their roles. So we do have different roles or rights within UPass that you can have. Read only is you can view the certified data, and that's typically your public. That's the default access. So even when you create an account, that's what you automatically have is default access as a read-only person. And at that time, either you've already communicated with us who you'll be working with, or we know based on the email that we get which LEA you're going to be over. And then at that point, we would determine whether you're the LEA submitter or the LEA, or if you have LEA business admin rights. The submitter can upload, manually enter, and pre-certify. Your third-party business officials must request access to this to submit for you on behalf of the LEA. A lot of that is your management companies. They'll have LEA submitter rights only. The LEA business admin has the same rights as the submitter, but they can also they are the ones that certifying the data, saying it's true and accurate and that it's in compliance.
Certified.
Good question. The pre-certify is there for those that are just uploading. You can actually double check and make sure everything is correct. If there's any errors in UPass, the person that submits it can check that before the person goes to certify. A big issue that comes up that can't be done on upload is check that the fund balances match. They can't have the data. We can't check the fund balances until we have the data in there. And so that's actually checked after the upload. And so that pre-certify button is actually very useful. It'll help you know whether there's a fund balance issue. If you're off on revenues and expenditures and your beginning balance shows one number and on your statements, your financial statements, you're showing another. And so it'll kind of match things, but you won't know that until it's actually uploaded. So that pre-certify button is actually very helpful. It's a new tool that we added, I think, last year to help you guys. Because we'd always come back and say the person's trying to certify and it's coming back with this error. So that just helps you do that check before you send it to the person to certify. Oh, and the person that has the certify capability must be an employee of the LEA. It can't be a party management company. And it is the LEA that is responsible for the data submitted. So That's why we require the person to certify it is an employee of the LEA. Reports are uploaded. As I mentioned earlier, you have the final and or original budgets that are uploaded, and then you have the actual file. All upload files must be in a .csv format and no special characters again, because it is CSV. It's a common delimited format. It doesn't like special characters. So keep it simple in the report. And a lot of the reports that we create outside of what's submitted, we use that actual report. Analyze and review the budgets, and that's in state code that we do that, and that we collect that data. But a lot of these supplementary reports that we have in UPEFs is based off the actual reports. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit. Here's a list if you don't know what these acronyms are, what the AFR is, the APR. SLR is a school level report. That's a fairly new federal mandate, the school level report, and I'll go into that as well. And then the ICT is the indirect cost tool. So that, if you look here, this is what's created based on what you submitted. Most of the reports use the actual reports. And here's kind of like if you were to take the template that we actually have on our website in UPEFs, you'll see that there's a fund, a location, program year, program, balance sheet, revenue, function, object, description, and amount column on the template. And this is where the data is pulling from for each one of those reports that we have. So the AFR is that in yellow. The parts in green is what we use to create the APR. And then the school level report is there in that lighter orange. Indirect cost tool data is blue. The deferred revenue is gray. And then the dark orange is the school fees report. So it kind of gives a breakout of when you submit that actual file, what data we're actually using and what pieces we're using to put together to create our several reports that we have. Let me go back here real quick. The indirect cost tool and deferred revenue require supplementary data on top of what we use here. So this is just one side of the data, and then we do require supplementary information to be submitted. So there's the upload reports, and there's the pathway to find these different reports. Is go to UPEFs, reporting, public reports, select the year, and select the submission type and the type of report that you want to look at. The annual financial report is budgets in UPEFs must match the approved LEA budgets. So whatever your board approves at year end or before the beginning of the year, whatever they approve, that's what we should see in UPEFs. And we apply that in the financial statements when we get to that point, but we would like to have that data as accurate as possible before we get into the actual submissions. Make sure your budgets are accurate. Reconcile the AFR to your financial statements. There is a variance of $25 that we allow. Before it was $10. We bumped it up this year to $25. I mean, obviously you want to be as accurate as you can within your systems and within the reports you create. But we do understand that there is that chance of things not reconciling 100%. And it may just be an off number that was carried over from the prior year. So we do allow some variance there. But USBE does reconcile the following by fund. So districts have more than one fund, and for each fund we reconcile against the assets, the liabilities, the fund balance, revenues, expenditures, and other financing sources and uses. That that way we can say that we have audited data in UPES and that we can use that data to send to legislators to have the public view if they wish, and know that it's really a reflection of what's in your financial statements. The annual program report, as I mentioned, it's a summary report only. It groups similar or like programs into schedules and columns. So one column on the APR may contain more than one program, or it may just be one altogether. LEAs must follow program accounting and provide necessary detail in the actual upload so that we an accurate APR for you guys. I wanted to cover for you guys. Let's see. Oh, I did want to mention that several departments here in USBE, once we have that available, they'll use the APR. A lot of it's used for maintenance of effort. So various sections use this data, so be as accurate as you can when you're reporting to us that it's a reflection of what's in your financial systems, because this is just a summary, but it may lead to other questions, and they may reach out to get that further detail from you. Questions? This next report is the school level report, or the SLR. It utilizes the actual upload data as well. It's also known as per pupil expenditure. Know the difference. So this provides by school location expenditure data. Basically, what is being spent for each individual at the school, at the pupil level, within the school location. And I would just want to know the difference between program and school. We want school location data. If it's a program that I know a lot of, I guess, pre-K is actually a good example. Pre-K, we don't generate ADM off of pre-K data. We only generate off of K through 12. So if it's typically if it's a pre-K location where you're teaching, that typically is a program based on this R277-100 rule. So look at that, know what's what for you, if you need to provide a location, a school location, or if it's at the district location. If it's at the district location, we kind of spread the cost across all schools, or if you want it to go to a specific school, you can do that as well. I didn't want to go into too much detail here, but just know what the difference between program and school, and also know that programs don't generate ADM, and we use ADM in our calculation. I actually should mention that a lot of this data is used at the federal level to determine funding for states, and also I know legislators have been looking at this quite a bit. So it's important that you provide accurate information, accurate locations that you have at your LEAs. School fees report, you don't need to do anything, but it's summarized by the Revenue Code 1740 through 1780 in relation to student fees. Breaks it out by program, and it's helpful within our department, within USBE, so that they can look at the student fees, the fee waivers, and co-curricular activities, those types of things. And here's some guidance in 53G7 and R277407. The indirect cost tool data and deferred revenue report are hybrid reports, in the sense that we do take data from the actual file, but there's also more information required as applicable to your LEA. Indirect cost tool. So if an LEA elects to charge indirect cost rates to programs, it must be negotiated with USBE annually by completing the following tasks. In UPES, We do have an indirect cost tool where you enter that information, and I'll go into more detail. I won't go into detail here, but I want to let you guys know that if you want to charge indirect costs to your programs, you do need to negotiate a rate with USDE. That does come through my team.
I had a question on that. I noticed that a couple of the grants we were awarded had indirect costs built into them, but we never elected to do indirect costs as an LEA. So I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that.
Is that in Utah grants? That would be Rebecca and her team.
And I've never had a grant where I haven't been able to leave that blank because it automatically populated an amount.
Do anything about it, and it was like the grants had already been started when I took over, and so I didn't even know what an indirect cost was. I submitted it, and now I'm realizing, oh, we don't do indirect costs, and now we've got 2 grants that have that.
So Becca could probably step in and describe it a little bit better, but from my understanding is that there's a piece of it that it's based on when the grant was entered into the system. The LEA may have had indirect costs, an indirect cost rate at that time. But if they never have, I would bring it up with her. Rebecca's a good person to have a better discussion with that. I just provide them the rates and they enter it into their system. So just know that if you do choose to have an indirect cost rate, we also need an organizational chart annually submitted to us. If nothing changed from the prior org chart to the current org chart, we can just take last year's and bring that in. But just let us know. That. And then also, the negotiated rate must be signed and returned to us. And a rate can't be used until that's returned to us. Go ahead.
We've never taken an indirect cost. What would the benefit of doing that be besides more people?
So there's a lot of, it's dependent on each LEA, but an overall suggestion is that indirect costs can actually direct cost from that program and put it towards overhead. A lot of those things, some LEAs kind of work it out. They spend their money so that they have a higher rate or a lower rate, depending on the needs of the LEA. But it's important that once you get a negotiated rate, that you take that out of the program and just make the program aware, hey, we got $10,000, we have 10% indirect cost rate, we're taking $1,000 of that and putting it over here toward. So you have $9,000 to spend. And a lot of program sections are aware that it does cost money to run their programs behind the scenes. And that's what that's for. But some LEAs feel like they can run just fine without taking indirect costs and function just fine. And others feel like they want more towards a little bit more to help with those indirect costs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I read the numbers. It didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, and if you're a small single-site charter school, I personally didn't do it because it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but definitely if you're a little bit larger LEA, then it can help out for sure. So.
So this is within UPEPS as well, the indirect cost. So all sections need to be certified, even if no data is entered. There's a button to click certify, even if it's blank. This is a federal requirement that we've allowed you the option to enter data for all of these sections, which includes the unallowable cost, square footage by building, unused leave, paid at termination, and contracts and subawards. It can be a little bit tedious gathering this supplementary information, and that's why a lot of LEAs choose not to do it. Through it, it's just an extra extra oversight, and so it just adds extra work.
We need to do that if we're not taking indirect costs.
If you're not taking indirect costs, you just need to let us know that you're not taking it. There's nothing in UPES that you need to do.
Okay. So I let you know.
Yeah, and this is done. Actually, we're still collecting some of the data, but if you don't want it, just let us know. Send us an email saying, "Hey, I don't want to participate in indirect costs." Typically, we see who does by when they submit their information, and then we start reviewing it and say, "Okay, this is what you're still missing, or everything looks good. We'll calculate a rate for you." Start in December, and we're working on it now, and we're using those rates in FY23. So we're calculating FY23 rates now. Typically, after our review and after they've been signed, it's in March, or by the time we give it to you, so you guys have time to work on your different programs to see what's going to be taken out of each program and put into indirects. Okay. One, data has to be kind of submitted. Actually, it was December 15th, but we're allowing LEAs that weren't able to make it by that date to still submit. We post them and get them approved by middle of March. To deferred revenue, I'll kind of go over really quick. I think I'm running out of time here. Deferred revenue report includes state and or federal unearned. If you have local unearned, we don't ask for more detail, but it's just when it's that state and federal unearned revenue that we do. And those are codes 95, 63, and 64 respectively. And we do have that set up in UPES to collect that. Don't include deferred outflows or inflows, just the unearned revenue and or deferred portions of it.
Well, what an example of an unearned revenue?
State special ed is a big one. Have to look at, I don't know if I should really say this, but it kind of based on the interpretation of your auditor on whether it gets reported as a fund balance in that program and recorded as earned revenue versus unearned revenue. There's some guidance, and I can provide that information as well, but there's some guidance on when that revenue is actually earned. A lot of times the expenditures have to incur first before you can report that revenue is earned. You may have the cash, you may have the funds for that program, but it's not earned until there's specific requirements met in relation to expenditures. That's kind of like the high level of it. It gets into more detail, and there's other guidance out there. But that's kind of what it is. This is what it looks like in UPES. You have to go in and enter that data in manually. You'll click on create, and you can see down there it doesn't match at that time. That LEA is off by $230-something thousand. And so within that system, within this reporting system, they'll go in and enter the deferred revenue by program so that we have that detail of what their ending balances are for that program. How to map chart of accounts. LEA must utilize USB codes when reporting within UPES. LEAs must be able to map their chart of accounts to USB-E approved codes. Any mapping changes requires the file to be uploaded. So if you go into the system and you change your mappings, that will require you to re-upload so that those new mappings can take place in the system. Here, you'll select the code to be mapped. This is just an example here. Going into funds, you'll go select the code to be mapped, and then there's also an unmapped code section and current mapping. This is where you'll enter your code and then what you want it code to be mapped to in USBE chart of accounts. You'll search, there'll be a drop down list of what you can search for. If you want your code 10 mapped to our code 50, then you could do that. Something like that. Edit it, even after you create it, you can edit or delete. That you don't want anymore that you used in the past, you can go in and delete. Mappings stay there from year to year until you go in and edit and or delete them. Code validations. This provides guidance for the following code combinations. It's on allowable code usage within UPass. We don't want LEAs charging their bus drivers to a function 1000. We want them to be reported correctly, and so we have validations set up within UPass what's allowed and what's not. And we have it set up for revenues, expenditures, and balance sheets. And you have access to what's live as far as the validations. If you come here to the top of UPass and click on View Rules Reports, I always export those to Excel. It's easier to see in Excel than on the web. The cleanest on the web version. So I always, when I run it, I always download to Excel, and you can filter, sort. However, if you're looking at a specific code, you want to see how we have it set up. And if you feel like if ours isn't accurate, let us know. We're more than willing to change mappings in there, but it would kind of have to be with a good purpose that we would change it. Deadlines and due dates. Here's a quick overview of deadlines and due dates. July 15th is the original and or final budget. Your board has to approve them before June 30th. They had to approve it before June 22nd. It's been changed, I think 2 years ago, it was changed to June 30th. They has to approve them. And then for LEAs, districts that are going through truth and taxation, they have until August 15th to provide that. Charters at this point will never go through truth and taxation, so it's a district thing, and that's just working with the county and city and providing the different taxing that they have. A lot of your funding is based on what you receive through taxes, and then we kind of have a formula based on that here at USBE to provide that amount. So we do allow an extension for that. October 1 is the actual submission. That's your AFR and APR and all the reports that are in there. December 15th is indirect cost tool, supplementary data as applicable to your LEA. And then December 30th is deferred or unearned revenue, and that's applicable because not LEAs have that. And then submissions via email, November 30th. That's your financial audit reports. This year there was an extension on single audits. So if you have a single audit, there is that extension. If you have questions on it, let me know. Then December 15th is the indirect cost organizational chart and detailed summary submitted to us via email, along with the supplementary information that's required. And here's just some quick helpful codes. I'll kind of end there. But if there's questions you guys have, let me know. These are a lot of the codes in relation to your budgets, your reports, funding, Money Management Act, procurement, and things like that. Questions?
Questions, you can put them in the chat if you don't want to.
Take it back to the research.
I'll send these out to you guys as well.
Yeah, we'll get everybody's presentations out to you. But okay, thanks, Brett. Let's take a break to 1:25 if that's okay with everybody. I know I could use a leg stretch here, and then we'll we'll be back with Cole and Neil at 1:25.
He mute that.
Well, one was voluntary.
Sure. Jamie too. Jamie was in the interview. Jamie, Natalie, and Vaughn.
Those of you virtually were, we'll wait on one or two more to get back from the restroom here. But any questions? Anything we need to adjust on the audio or the video? Everything going okay there? There's loud breathing. We can blame that on Neil.
Computer's at a DOA.
Oh, dang it. It's fine.
There's a lot of fire.
waiting for one more person. You folks from Newell, I was going to use one of your prior monthly board reports to show as an example. Is that okay?
Silence is a yes.
Yeah.
You're muted.
Well, let Cole and Neil start off here. Take it away.
Can you guys hear me okay? And that's yes until somebody says otherwise. So like I said, I'm Cole Shakespeare. I'm the Fiscal Monitoring Program Manager. I've been at USB for about just over 4 years. Been doing fiscal monitoring the whole time here. So fiscal monitoring program, this whole team is kind of a new thing here at USBE. Previously, we were all kind of siloed out into individual programs. Neil Stevens and myself were in special ed. Tammy and Marilee, they were in the title programs. And the other people you see listed on here, they make up the rest of the team. They are newly hired within the last year. So we currently have 7 fiscal monitors covering various programs. We've got one open position we're trying to fill right now. And then starting July 1, we should be adding 3 more fiscal monitors to take over the school fees stuff. So monitoring school fees, providing training.
If they are funded.
If they are funded by the legislature. If not, that stuff will still get sent on my team and we'll be even more swamped. So hopefully that gets funded. So yeah, like I said, so the whole team came together about a year ago. And so we're just putting things together, getting things going, trying to standardize processes and procedures across the board. Just get everybody on the same page. So if you have any questions about any of these programs, reimbursement requests if they have them, questions about specifics in those programs, you can reach out to me and I'll get you in contact with these folks. Or you can find their information on our website or call our office and they can get you connected to these people that are over these programs. So for fiscal monitoring, there's kind of basically 3 levels of it that we look at, as you can see here in this triangle pyramid. So we got the bottom is universal monitoring, very broad-based. Universal will touch every LEA in some aspect. That's why it's universal. Then sampling is a smaller size of, the group that we'll choose from, more specific things. And then the very top is our risk-based monitoring, which is based off the individual LEA financial or fiscal risk. So I'll go into each of these briefly as we go forward. So we've got universal monitoring. Like I said, it touches all LEAs. So like Brett mentioned in his presentation, every LEA submits their audited financials to USBE. Brett and his team look at those, reconcile them, and then they assign a risk score, based on the findings and whatnot that your auditors had. They review AFR, APR. My team looks at that data as well. If Brett has any concerns, he sends that info to us and we take a look at that. Also, many programs need an annual application to receive funding. Like for example, the federal IDA special ed funding requires an annual application. We get those from every LEA. We review them and approve them. And then all reimbursement requests, they at least have to get approved through us, through our Utah grant system. So at least at a high level, based on what is submitted with the reimbursement request, everything gets looked at. So that way everything kind of gets looked at least at a high level. As we move forward into the sample monitoring section, so the way that LEA that we had LEAs selected in this, we get lots of communication and feedback from our program staff. Sometimes they will request that an LEA, they say, hey, this LEA probably needs a fiscal monitoring visit. We're going to visit this LEA next month. You guys want to come with us? Stuff like that. So that can happen, if we haven't been to that LEA in a long time, they haven't had a fiscal monitoring visit in a long time, we can jump in and go with them and just say, yeah, let's do it. So this could be a full on-site visit or virtual visit. We are open to doing both, but we prefer to do on-site just because we like to come and see you guys face to face. It's easier to show us documentation and whatnot, and just build reports with you guys. So also, like I said, with the reimbursement requests, sometimes LEAs will submit a general ledger or documentation with their reimbursement request. And if we see something on that documentation that we question, or we see a reimbursement request with no documentation but something seems out of whack, or we want to look into something, we'll randomly select those LEAs that catch our attention and those documents, and we'll send them back and request further documentation or explanation on those things, and then we try and get those approved again still, so you guys still get paid for those reimbursements on that month's allotment memo. Also, I couldn't decide if I should put this in sample monitoring or the risk monitoring, but we have many smaller programs that don't have full participation from all LEAs. And so they've been being monitored on like a rotation, like a schedule. So say, for example, a program has like 20 LEAs that participate in it. We could select to do 7 LEAs every year on a 3-year rotation or something like that. So just select a few of the LEAs that participate in those smaller programs and then go from there. Our risk-based monitoring. So this is based off your LEA fiscal risk score, which comes from a fiscal risk rubric. It's completed annually by LEAs, typically with the application for certain funds. And your risk score is assigned based on the answers that you guys give us on those risk assessments. So we don't currently have a specific risk assessment for each program. We do for SPED. The SPED special ed one, we actually modified the one that was created by the state of Idaho Department of Education, and they spent time with OSEP and the federal government developing it and choosing the 10 risk factors that they would use. And so we figured that was a good place to start back when Neil and I started here 4 years ago. And so there are slight variations to that for our title programs, and we are working on modifying that for some of our other programs that our new fiscal monitors are working on. So in the past, and until we get a risk assessment for each program, the programs that don't have a specific one, we look at the risk score that Brett's group assigns to LEAs based off their audit. And then we also take into consideration if we receive a fraud hotline tip through our internal audit department, or if our program staff, we've had occasion where, teachers or something in that program has told our program staff, hey, we've got issues with this, we think fraud's going on. So like it says here, any hotline tips or tips of fraud we receive, we consider them to be very high risk, and we look into them, as soon as we can. They kind of jump to the top of our priority list and our schedule, regardless of what we've got going on. So, yeah, and based on those tips and whatnot, that may result in a full on-site visit, some interviews to investigate what's going on and whatnot. Okay, so how we select LEAs to who we're going to go visit each year. We take the fiscal risk score that you guys submit with your application. So for example, LEAs just finished the IDA application and the risk assessment for your FY23. We'll take that data you guys just submitted on those risk scores and we'll put it in a list and we will create our monitoring list based off those scores that you guys just gave us. So that sets us up who we're going to go visit next year in FY23. Like I said, special ed and title, we use the same one right now. CTE has their own risk assessment. They ask financial questions and then they also have specific program questions for the CTE program. As I mentioned, we're working on getting more programs to have a specific risk assessment. And we're getting our new guys to work on that as they get into the programs, get familiar with them, kind of get their feet wet and can determine what's going on and where they can help. As I mentioned, we work with our program staff closely, monitor their concerns. And yeah, that's pretty much how we select our monitoring visit. We try to visit the highest risk scores annually, but COVID and everything's gotten in the way that last couple of years. And, it's a lot of work when we start digging into things and finding issues, but that's what we try to do. And as we get more staff here on the fiscal monitoring team, we're hoping that we can get out and do more visits annually than we have in the past. So what to expect when you get a monitoring visit from us. So this last year in Utah grants, they finalized and created a fiscal monitoring module. So instead of us just communicating solely via email or via phone, we're going to work through Utah grants. We'll send out notifications of the visit and we'll pick the dates. And in there we can select what documentation we would like to look at beforehand. You guys can submit it in there, and we'll work through that. And that's so we can have all this information in one place rather than scattered through various people's emails and on different shared drives here at USBE, so everybody can have access to that. And through that Utah grants, that's where the report will go through. You guys will work through everything in Utah grants. We've had a couple visits already go through it. So we're learning that module as well as you guys. So that's going to be fun as we get going through that. But hopefully it streamlines things and helps us, be more organized with that. As I mentioned, we can do our visits in person or virtually. Myself, I like to do them in person. I like to come out and visit and, sit face to face, and we do an interview and whatnot. And then that way, if you guys, you don't have all your invoices and stuff online, if you need to show them to us, it's easier, to show them to us in person rather than you have to dig them out and then scan them and all that nonsense. So, but if you guys would like it to be in or virtually, we can do that. Like I said, we've all learned over the last 2 years, lots of stuff can be done virtually rather than in person. So we'll work with each LEA individually, case by case, and determine what we'll do with that. So like I mentioned, a visit, we typically come, we do an interview, typically takes about a half hour to an hour, just a basic finance questions, ask you about your finance policies and procedures, like how you record your expenses, what your approval process is for purchasing and that kind of stuff. We typically look at a couple years worth of general ledgers, the current year and 2 or 3 years prior. We pull a sample of individual expenses or line items, look at the supporting documentation for that. And we look at time documentation. And if we need to, we ask to look at some payroll journals, invoices, purchase orders, that kind of stuff, make sure the things have been purchased and charged to specific programs are allowable, they're recorded correctly, make sure your time and effort documentation is correct, and is, shows that the people working in those programs should be, and that they certified that time. Make sure you're getting proper approvals on your invoices and that kind of stuff. So the main things we are looking for is program compliance. Each program, especially ones that are restricted, for example, special ed, that's, what I did for the last 4 years. Make sure that LEAs are spending that money correctly. Special ed, state and federal funding is both quite heavily restricted and have, specific uses that they can be used for. So that's what we look for when we look at the general ledgers. So we look at the federal rules, uniform grant guidance, our state code, our USBE board rules. We check to make sure you guys are following your own policies and procedures. Make sure you've got supporting documentation and proper accounting, like Brett mentioned earlier. The program accounting, we've had issues with non-compliance in the past with the program accounting. Also, we look for ways, to help you guys be compliant, and especially you new BAs. If you would like any of my team to come down and do some one-on-one trainings on individual programs, we're more than happy to do that. Again, it could be in person or virtual. We can come down and go through, special ed's a big one. We've done lots of, in-person TA and gone over special ed basics with BAs and SPED directors. We can do that kind of stuff. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We will research them, give you answers. If we don't know it, we know people who do. Leah Voorhees, she's over the special ed program. Incredibly smart, been in the program for a lot of years. And then we also have contacts at the federal level and federal TA centers. We reach out to and ask them questions and bounce things off that. And if you guys need help developing policies and procedures to help with program compliance, we can help with that as well. So that's what I have on the fiscal monitoring team, kind of what to expect and how we assign risk and select LEAs for visits and whatnot. Are there any questions on that before I turn it over to Neil to run through just some SPED basics real quick?
So I don't see anything from the chat. But
okay. You want me to go to 2 or?
Maybe could you compress it to 155? Give us a 5-minute break before.
Sure.
Before it stills to.
Just my.
Yeah.
Okay.
If not, we'll just push it back a little bit.
I don't think it's hard.
Okay. You need to go to 2. That's fine.
Okay. Preface this presentation. There's a lot of information here, a lot of information that we won't be able to touch on today, but it will be available in this PowerPoint, and our contact information, Cole and I's, is listed in here. Contact us. Except before, we were willing to go out and do one-on-one trainings. We were out at a LEA for about 3-4 hours earlier this last month. So we're more than happy to do that if that's an avenue that you would like to pursue. So just an overview of state special education funds in general. You have 2 funding sources. We have state funds and federal funds. State funds comprise about 60 to 70%, depending on the LEA, of your total special education funding. The remaining balance is from federal funds. The biggest difference between state and federal funds is federal funds are on a reimbursement basis only, meaning you have to spend the money first and then seek reimbursement from us, whereas state funds are distributed on a 1/12 basis. You get 1/12 of your annual allotment every month, and there's no expiration date, with a caveat that every year we look at balances through the APRs and deferred revenue reports to determine if you have exceeded 20% of your total total expenditures. So essentially what we do is we add up all the expenditures in special education, multiply that by 20% to get a threshold. If your LEA has greater than 20% of a balance in state special education of your total expenditures, we will then reclaim that in the following year. So you want to make sure that keep track of your budgets to see where you're spending it. Essentially, especially make sure that your budgets that you are spending exceed your annual allotment. We have LEAs that have balances of 300% because they have been spending less than the annual allotment, and over years that adds up. So that's probably the biggest key for state funds is ensure you're spending sufficient amount for your LEA.
So the reason that there's a big, lots of information on that right now is in the last couple of years, the legislature has become aware of these large carryover balances of SPED funds, and they don't like large amounts of money sitting out there while LEAs are saying every year, we need more money, but yet there's large amounts of money sitting there being unused.
So the expectation is as they increase the OEPU, the LEAs each year, which is a primary funding mechanism at the state level, is that there'll be a corresponding increase in spending on students for their educational needs, and not be saving that money for rainy days or for future uses, but that's actually spending on students. Moving on, so special education has some very detailed regulations. These are the three main regulations we're going to find. 34 CFR 300 is the federal regulations for states for special education. It includes programmatic uses, federal financial requirements, compliance requirements. It's all located here. It also tells you how, or outlines how I, as a state board employee, will allocate the federal funding out to LEAs. Very complicated formula. Probably don't want to dive too deep in that. If you want to, you're welcome. And if you have questions, I'm always willing to answer those questions. Essentially, there's a base amount of funding allocated to LEAs based on 1997 levels. When students move from one LEA to a newer expanding charter school, the base amount moves with that student. The remaining amounts are allocated based on percentage of the population of total students in the state that your LEA has, and percentage of students in poverty that your LEA has. And that compromises the majority of that. In 2 CFR 200, it's the general fiscal requirements for all entities that receive government federal funding. A lot of our compliance that we look at is found in those sections, specifically sections 300 and 400. These are hyperlinked in the PowerPoint. When you see it, you can click on there to take it right to the page to look at specific areas. And then lastly, state special education rules. We have a rules manual. It's essentially 300 pages long. The fiscal portion of the rules starts on page 201. Again, this is hyperlinked to that page to start there. It outlines different funding sources and how you can use those funds, specific cases of what's allowable. At the end of that, there's a long chart by object code and by function code of what are allowable uses of funds for special education funds. So if something's in there that says no, that means don't use it. Maybe means contact us, ask questions, make sure it's a clear cut case that is allowable cost. And lastly, there's also a list that gives you the green light. Yeah, you can spend this on this one without asking any questions. And these are listed in order of hierarchy. So the control, always 34 CFR 100 is going to have a controlling over state rules of whether or not this is an allowable cost. Use of funds. This is just an infographic. An IEP is an individual education plan for a student that is in the special education program. And that controls whether a cost is allowable or not. So essentially, if it's listed in the IEP, it's an allowable activity. If it's an allowable activity, it's also allowable cost, and then you can expend the funds in that manner. But if it's not an IEP-driven cost that's required by that student's needs, then it's not an allowable activity, and that's an allowable cost, and it means you can't expend the funds in that way. So whenever we look at it, is this an allowable cost? Always goes back to, is this cost driven by a student's IEP only? This IEP students or students in this special education fund are considered gen ed students first. So for example, their lunchroom services are part of a general ed cost we must provide. Their transportation services, unless they have a unique transportation need, are part of the general education. Same thing with extracurricular activities and so on and so forth. Computers, same thing. Every student has a computer in the class or in the classroom of the school, then the special ed students entitled to that from a general education standpoint before it reaches special education. That's kind of the driver of how things work. I'm going to go through all these. I have limited time. Just know that allowable costs got to be necessary and reasonable. You got to follow your procurement for it. If it's inventory, it's got to be a state and special ed. You can't move things between programs unless you receive permission for unique purposes. But that's the keyword is permission. Ask us for permission to do those things. One thing on here not listed is very important. If you're going to purchase an item that costs more than $5,000 for a single unit, you must seek permission from the state board prior to purchasing the item. And that's a federal rule for all federal funds, not just special ed, but CTE, title programs, Perkins, special ed, all those programs require that you seek permission first. I highlight that because in the past 12 months of coronavirus funding, we've had situations where LEs have not followed that. And then ask for reimbursement. We see an item that costs a large amount. It's not had a pre-approval, so it's go back to that process. Not many items you can do that with. I mean, buy a car for more than $5,000, but the majority of your technology inside of your schools will be less than $5,000 per unit. I mean, a smart board might be $3,500. Most of them don't reach $5,000. So that's one exception where we need to contact the state board for permission. Allowable costs, just know that, except for if the cost is generated from a general education standpoint first, it's not an allowable cost. If it's from an IEP standpoint, meaning it's a specific service listed in their IEP that they need to have, then that's an allowable cost. Cost to be necessary, very reasonable, and they have to be treated consistently across all programs. And these citations at the top are all in the 2 CFR guidance that's been listed previously. It has to be prudent, it has to be ordinary, necessary. We're not going to allow you to pay $5,000 for the 32-inch TV. We know that's not allowed. It's not a prudent person test. It's not market rates. So we need to be looking at those things when we purchase items. If it's a sole source situation, that's understandable, but we need to go through a specific process to have those costs approved. And that usually is LE specific about how you go through your procurement in sole source items. Must be allocable, meaning you have to be able to identify where you're charging you to specifically grant. From an accounting standpoint, we work on a program accounting where each funding source is its own program, and you must be able to allocate your expenses to an individual program. If it's across many programs, you must demonstrate how it benefits each of those programs. For federal funds, for federal special education funds, indirect costs are allowed. It must be consistent across all programs of how you charge direct costs. For state special education funds, indirect costs are not allowed, only direct costs. This goes back to our previous slide. We talked about how in the special education rules manual, there is a list of allowable costs. If there's questions of whether it's allowable or not, please refer to that list. If you have questions about that list, please contact USBE so we can be able to walk you through that process. And because we ultimately, when we do our monitoring visits, we do not want to find unallowable costs. So if we can prevent that and have that conversation up front, that's the preferred method of determining whether the cost is allowable or not. Excess cost is the test that we are required to do by federal regulation. Essentially, it says that we must spend a certain amount of state and local funds on special education prior to accessing federal funds. Federal funds are supplementary to the education of the students. It's not the sole source that you can depend on for special education. And so this is, it's a complex formula. It gets filled out every year at application time that basically establishes the baseline, and then we verify that you spent at least that baseline on a per student basis. I won't go into that here, again, because it's very complicated and unnecessary at this juncture, because most of us have already filled it out as part of the application this year. And the way we're doing it will be changing. We received updated guidance from our federal partners. OSEP is Office of Special Education Programs. They have updated the guidance on how we should be doing it. So USB is going to change their method to reflect the updated guidance. Talked about this already. MOE. So skip the slide here. MOE is means of effort. Essentially, means of effort says you must spend the same amount or more on special education as the prior year, absent an exemption. There are 4 calculation methods. We look at total state and local funds expended, state and local per student or per pupil, local only, and local per pupil. When you look at all 4 categories, you must meet that only in one. So for example, if you spent $1 last year local funds, you can spend $1 this year in local funds and still meet it, even if your local and state combined is less than the prior year. We do those calculations starting about now. It's based on the APR data. It's based on that has already been validated by Brett's team against the audited financials. If we find a shortfall, we would contact the LEA. We will walk through the valid exemptions to try and find an exemption to be able to reduce your means of effort baseline so you be compliant that year. In the 4 years that Cole and I have been here, we have never had an LEA not meet. I believe that's still correct. An example of what it looks like, the calculation. We go through each year. Not much to add here, except that, like you notice in some years they didn't meet, but they met in other areas. Only have to meet in one category, not in all 4 categories. So we have some flexibility, and we try our maximum effort to find flexibility where needed. The state special education rules, always refer back to the handbook, the rules manual. If you have questions about how to spend that money, state special education funds are restricted to special ed students only for direct costs of direct services. So you will not be allowed to use special ed funds at state level to compensate for your payroll services or your business office services or your superintendent's office. Those are all indirect costs, and they're not allowed to be charged to the state special ed funds.
What about a charter director?
No. A charter director, and I'm glad you brought that up. We had about 5 schools a couple years ago that we went and did monitoring visits that they were charging their charter director to special education funds. They didn't have any evidence that the charter director was doing any special education related activities. So that became an unallowable cost that they had to repay 100% of those funds.
So I guess the caveat to that would be if the charter director is filling in as the charter director and the special ed director, they get charged the time associated with sped director services to special ed funds.
But they must have time documented that's spent. It's not a verbal, hey, yeah, I know he did some special ed stuff, so we're good, right? No. You have to have time and effort documentation. And we haven't touched on this here, but all federal funds require time and effort documentation of the time spent by the employee compensated with federal funds. And that also extends to state special education funds. Because of the trouble we've found in the past, we implemented that rule for state funds as well to document the time of personnel, how they spend their time. And essentially is if they receive $1 state, $1 federal, they get document how they spend their time for the 100% of the work they do. So if they're a full-time employee and they work 50 hours a week, they need to document 50 hours a week of time and how they did the work. Just activities of how they spent their time. You know, am I working 100% in special ed? That's fine. You document that. But if I'm working the lunchroom 20% of the time, the playground 5% of the time, remaining in special ed, document that and charge it to the appropriate cost categories. This is just an infographic about how.
So are there any employees in special ed that don't need time and effort?
Everybody needs it.
Everybody in special ed needs time and effort. Everybody who is caveat, anybody paid with special ed funds. You can have a pair serving in a special ed classroom, but if he or she is paid with regular ed WPU funds that are unrestricted, free game. You don't have to document that. But if you use special ed funds for that, you must document it. Paras, secretaries, teachers, yeah, anybody who provides those services. Even your caveat, large charters have contracted staff by outside firm to provide special ed services in their school. Those are a contractor, not an employee, so that they'll require time and effort. But you need to keep detailed records of the invoicing and what you paid for services for when it comes to monitoring or an audit by your external auditors to determine that's an allowable cost. Bottom line is you always need to have records of how the money was spent.
And generally, if they know what they're doing, they do a good job on the invoice.
Yeah.
But if it's a new person or someone inexperienced, make sure you detail, I need on your invoice every, the services that they're providing, so that
essentially, end of the day, we need to be able to tie back your money you spent to what the activity was for to a student's IEP. We don't always do that, but we did have an LA we visited that we had to do that. And we had to trace money back, and they weren't able to document back to an IEP that Johnny had an IEP for speech and he received speech services on this day by this person. And so if you can't tie the invoice back to the student, back to their IEP needs, that becomes an unallowable cost. That's why documentation is so important. And especially it's very important because if a student, on the program side, if a student does not receive their services outlined in an IEP, the school can be held for non-provision of free and appropriate public education, which is a federal requirement. And then that school would then be required to compensate for the lack of services and provide additional servicing on top of that. An example, my son is autistic. He's in special ed. I had COVID, and so we were in quarantine for about 15 school days. And he did not receive any special ed services during that time. So I went to the district office, and I highlighted this problem, and they had to have a employee provide reading and behavioral services to my son after school online for the time that he missed that was documented in his IEP, in this case, an hour a day. So they had to provide 15 hours of additional instruction at their cost. So that's why it's important that we provide the services on the IEP and document those services are provided either through teacher time or through contractor time that rolls up into your accounting system. Very complicated, I know, but also very important on many levels. Thank you for that sidebar, Sam. This is just a graphic about how you receive your funds, about regular ed add-on, special ed add-on is about 75% of the total funds you receive. Everything else is a lesser amount. I will highlight that not every LA receives all these fundings. So intensive services mostly goes to large districts that have high need students that may be wheelchair bound or maybe intubated each day or deaf blind. Those types of students that require high levels of services receive intensive service funding. Preschool is limited mostly to districts. I don't think there may be a handful of charters that receive preschool funding, but majority of it's just districts. You can find a summary of our allowable costs for each of these programs and their requirements in our rules manual. Here's some hyperlinks for your convenience to click through there if you have any questions. Add-on formula.
Go back. She wanted to take a photo.
It's just applicable.
I can email you this. We can email you this, right?
Yeah.
After
Then I
this.
have to go back through all of the slideshows.
Add-on formula. I always add this. It's a very complex formula. It looks at a 5-year average, looking back 2 years to guarantee you a certain amount of funding level. We also fund growth through there. If you have specific questions, whether you're getting enough funding or why your funding increased not enough or decreased potentially, let us know and we'll walk through that with you. Like I said, this is the largest portion of your funding here. Impact aid, it's a lesser portion. This is basically to fund the increased administrative responsibilities for having special ed students in your offices or in your buildings. It's just to help out offset some of those costs there. It's also for students to take custody, which mostly applies to larger districts or low incidence disabilities such as deaf blindness or emotional disturbance or TBI, traumatic brain injury. Those are other things that this funding will be given for. Special education extended school year. This is for students who have a retracement of their learning during the summertime from what they learned the prior year. So it basically funds a very small portion of what they can get in services during the summertime. So there are very specific requirements to qualify for this, and your special director will address those, but just know you get some of that funding for that purpose. And this funding is restricted for that purpose only. You couldn't pay for services during the school year with ESY services. That would be against the rules for this. And if that was discovered during a monitoring visit, we would ask that those funds be paid back.
And we have some.
Yes, we have. Quickly, ESYE, it's extended year for special educators. It's time for special educators to go through their files of the students that they are serving to make sure that they are in working order, that they comply with the documentation requirements. It's either before the school year starts or after the school year ends, and there's specific amounts that we give. The biggest thing is this is a reimbursement, meaning that you must pay your educators prior to receiving this funding. Under state law, a person on payroll must receive payment for services within 30 days of that pay period ending. So they provide services on June 1st, and normally they're paid on June 15th for that services. You must pay them by July 15th. Otherwise, you're in violation of the state rule regarding payroll. I say that because we've had schools hold on to that funding until they're reimbursed, and then they pay their educators. Well, that's not allowable. You have to be paid first, and then it will reimburse you. Census services, I talked about already. It's really those individual students who have really high needs that result in high costs. It requires an application that we provide through your special ed director to fill out detailed cost categories. Typically, we receive requests between $3.5 and $7.5 million of eligible costs for this. Right now, we only have $1.2 million to disperse. So the highest cost students get funding priority over lower cost students, and inevitably there's many students who don't get funded because of the needs the resources. Preschool, it's for students ages 3 to 5 that are in the preschool environment. Restricted to that area only. A self-contained, these are students who have more than 180 minutes of services indicated on their IEP per day. It doesn't mean that they're only in a special classroom. It just means that they have at least 180 minutes of service per day. And we fund that based off the December 1 count. It's supposed to be used for those students only. Meaning if you have a speech student that has 30 minutes of service in the IEP, the use of this funding for his speech therapist would be unallowable. And this is a quick infographic about how students are funded at the state level. So you notice here we have an add-on, a general education, and a self-contained. Well, if a student has less than 180 minutes of services on their IEP, half their funding comes from general education, half their funding comes from add-on. But if they have more than 180 minutes of service in their IEP, half of their funding comes from add-on and half comes from self-contained. Regardless of their need, they are funded the same amount. And that amount down to 3809 may not be accurate for this year and the upcoming year, but that is the WPU equivalent. So that will.
Accurate for 22.
Is it? Okay. It's been a while since I had involved in the funding of that, but so that just gives you an example of how they're funded at the state level. For different other states, some other states may fund things based on disability type, incentivizing more costly services or disabilities over others. In Utah, we don't do that. We just fund everybody at the equal amount. And this is only state funding. Federal funding is not quite this transparent. It's a more complex model that's really hard to track on a per student basis. So, contact information, feel free to call us or email us if you have questions, if you want additional training, or whatever, give us a call. We'll always help you guys out. Yes, Sam.
Question, Neil. How often should a UVA meet with their special ed director?
Often. Monthly at minimum. So
there's no rule about that. That's our recommendation. We found where lots of BAs and not just sped directors, but I would imagine they don't have a great working relationship. A lot of the program directors see it as the BA just tells me how much money I can get or how much money I have each year. I don't have any other input otherwise. We highly recommend you guys work together because, they obviously know their program needs. They know, what's allowable and what's not. So we just really highly recommend having a good working relationship, specifically with SPED, but also all your other program managers. It'll just help things go very smoothly.
So 3 areas to focus on your special ed director: time and efforts. Who's collecting them? How often they done? Are they done according to LEA policy procedures? To assign who's responsible for those and have a collection of those and to ensure they're done regularly. Number 2 is your budget. Make sure that you're spending appropriate amounts, that you're not overspending other categories, and also that you will meet MOE. I encourage LEAs to establish an annual budget to meet MOE and review the progress on that budget monthly at least, if not quarterly at the very least. Monthly is better. And the last area in that is just review your spending to verify that they're allowable costs. That's through looking at POs monthly or invoices or actual budget, your accounting logs, is how you categorize your expenses. Make sure that that's done appropriately. If you're reviewing it and it's been reviewed before we get there, chances of us finding an allowable cost are much less than if it's just expenses throughout the year not looked at on a regular basis. Because the reality is that your external auditors are not going to be looking at detailed expenditure data that doesn't have high dollar amounts, in the thousands of dollars. You're buying supplies or you're paying for paras, whatever. They're not going to be looking at that level of data, but we are. And so if you look at that and validate that before we arrive, the chances of you not having any findings in a monitoring visit are increased greatly. And really, that's the goal of USBE. We don't want to find things, but we have to have an assurance to our federal partners and the legislator and state auditor's office that we are safeguarding these public education funds appropriately for our program rules. If you have any questions on how to do that best or need help with that, contact us and we'll help you guys the best we can. Always, if there's any questions, let us know.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Cole. Other questions?
Oh, I just wondered when we find out what our IDEA funds were.
Yes. So that is updated and back in December 1 count is done. It's available around December 15th. I have to go and update funding based on new expanding charter schools every year. And so historically, full funding is received in February or March. I'm trying to get more money out to LEAs ahead of time rather than holding the funds till that time. So I put half out in the beginning of the year, and then I put the remaining after I accrue or account for these new and expanding charter schools. I hope to have that done towards the end of this week or next week. So you'll see a budget amendment request in Utah grants. But if you look at your funding you have right now, you're pretty much guaranteed to receive close to double what you have right now.
Yeah, that our funding was half of last year.
So yeah, that's what it is. And we sent a few emails. I'm not sure where they at, but basically we email sent out in June with the anticipated full year amounts. And so if you have that email or you've seen that email, you can rely pretty closely that will be your amounts. Yeah.
Other questions before let's break till 2:20, and then Dale, you can still have an hour if you need it, but we'll break till 2:20 and see you at that point. All right, we are back here, and Dale Frost is here, our MSP administrator. So we'll turn the time over to him.
Sure, I'm not causing any feedback. Are we good? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Dale Frost, MSP Administrator. I've only been in this role since, what, September? And I've been the fiscal policy analyst for 2.5 years or something like that. And getting used to my role a little bit, but until I get through a whole year, I'm not going to feel comfortable in this role. And there's still a lot to know. So I will try my best to answer any questions you have right now, but I may have to go back and research things. So I'm going to quickly go over, give you just a very high level overview of how much and where MSP funds, so that's the minimum school program, go. And then I'm going to show you a few resources to find state level information about the MSP and answer any questions that you have. We received some specific questions about voted and board calculations for school districts, so I'll go over that a little bit today. And yeah, there's way more to cover than an hour, but hopefully can find out what's going on about program X, Y, or Z. And I hope you all have my contact information because I'm the one who sends out your allotment memos. So you should have that, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Okay, good. All righty. And then if you have a question, please tell me your name and then your school, so I can know the context of your question. So, all right. So this is 22 funding, total funds received by schools. It's about $7 billion. Not a small chunk of change. As you can see, state funds make up the majority of the funds. When you look on the uses side, the MSP is about 80% of those funds. USBE, we're not spending $1.4 billion here in this building. We're, only about 30 or something million dollars. But there are a whole host of programs outside of MSP that go to LEAs that go through that USBE line, and the school building program also goes to LEAs. So when you look at the MSP, there are 3 line items. The basic school program, if you've heard the term WPU, weighted pupil unit, WPUs are in the basic school program, and that's the majority of the funding. Vote and board, local levy programs, I'm going to go over later. That goes to school districts and is a guarantee program. It also benefits charter schools, though, because charter school local replacement is calculated based on the average of what is kind of essentially the student average of the local levy funds for districts, and it's to backfill that. Related to basic school programs is all state funds, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There are about 50 programs there, but we can drill down to any if you have specific questions. So here's the basic school program and the drill where funds are going. Remember, you're talking about special ed programs. Well, that's that 400 on the state side, $440 million, that green slice right there. Grades 1 through 12 makes up the majority of those funds, and you can see where the other pieces of funding go. On the grades 1 through 12 program, every student, not student, every ADM generates a WPU for school districts, and then there's different WPU levels depending on where the grade of that student for charter schools. I'm not going to go into detail about the grades 1 through 12 calculation and the major update. I've done that in other trainings. I'd be happy to answer other questions about when you see what numbers for that. The last thing I wanted to why am I going full screen here?
Presenting teams at the top.
Up here?
No, go back to your presentation.
Oh, presenting teams. Hey, no. Present. PowerPoint Live. That's better. So I wanted to make this point here, and so this is just the piece of grades 1 through 12 funding, now looking at all funding sources. To make this point here, often we hear even BAs saying, well, you know, the value, like a student's funded at this WPU value, which is the 3809 for 22. It's true. You can see that even though that's the kindergarten grades 1 through 12 is the biggest slice of any program for all funding going to schools, it still only makes up 35% of all funding going to schools, which is why the WPU value could be 3809, and if you divide all funds this year by the enrollment, you get just over $10,000. So, and it'll become a little clearer how you could have this kind of disparity, but I wanted to make that point. A lot of people get that confused. So let me stop. So how do I stop presenting? I want to now just share my screen. All right. So I'm going to show you two resources on the legislature's website that I would highly recommend you bookmark and get familiar with. So le.utah.gov is the legislature's main website. le.utah.gov. So if you go on there, if there's this tab called budget here. I have worked in budget related matters and issues in 3 different states, and I do think that Utah does a good job of being transparent on the budget. So budget.utah.gov is this link over here, budget. If you scroll down, you'll see the section that says all products. I'm going to spend time here on the COBE, the Compendium of Budget Information, and the annual budget of the state of Utah. So those are the two that I would get familiar with. So if you click on fiscal 22, which is our current year right now for the annual budget of the state of Utah, you get, so I'm going to scroll up to the top because I'm already, yeah. So you get, this is what it looks like at the beginning. It's basically a very long PDF. You need to go to the public education section. So if you see over here, scrolling down, sorry, where are the sections? Okay. So the budget for Utah is organized by subcommittee that looks at different areas of the budget. So this section 7 is the one that you probably look at in most detail. I'm not going to go through all of section 7, but these tables are very important that you should become familiar with. These are the MSP tables. So this first table, that's in blue here, these are the sources for the funds that go to the MSP. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the Uniform School Funding Education Fund are funded through income taxes, but you'll also have property taxes as well as a host of other things that go into. So if you see here, here's the $5 billion that are part of MSP in 22. So I'm going to focus here on the sources side. So this column here, this second column is fiscal year 2021, and then our current year, fiscal year 2022, is the second column. So here you can see the WPU value and the basic tax rate. Here's the 3809 for the WPU value. If you are, so this is a good resource to always go back to if you have questions on what the WPU value is. You can go to past years too. So over here, here are the allocation of WPUs. There are a lot of people who believe that in the basic school program, one student equals one WPU, and that's not the case. It's a whole host of different calculations. In grades 1 through 12, right here, which is the biggest part, it's essentially true, one student equals one WPU, but not exactly. But you can see that there are 604,069 WPUs in grades 1 through 12. But you can see that there are WPUs in these other programs. Neil went, for example, a little bit the special ed add-on, the WPUs there. Well, there are 88,000 WPUs appropriated to that program. You know, let me give an example. So kindergartners, there's just over 50,000 kindergartners in the state. The kindergarten program generates 0.55 WPUs per ADM for a kindergartner. And if, you know, 50,000 divided by 5 is right around 26,000. So that's why there's 26,000 WPUs in that program, which are worth $100 million this year. There are a host of different programs here. I can go into different calculations, but mostly if you have questions about each of these, I'd suggest you look in the Cobian, which is the next part that I'm going to go into, the next resource I'm going to highlight. But before I move on from the basic school program, are there questions that you all have about the basic school program? This is your primary funding source. Depends. So if you look over here, and this is even not the case. So, but these categories are generally unrestricted. So you see kindergarten, grades 1 through 12, foreign exchange students, necessarily existing small schools, right? These are generally unrestricted. There are some exceptions, but these are the restricted programs here. You have SPED, you have students at risk, you have CTE, and you have the class size reduction. But even so, for example, class size reduction is generally, you know, a lot of that is fairly unrestricted, but parts of it are not, and it has to be used in grades K-8. It can't be used in grades 9 through 12. So, but yeah, the most unrestricted, when we talk about like completely unrestricted funds, it's really what we're talking about is K-12, those two programs right there. And what LEA are you with?
Paradigm.
Okay. Questions? Anybody online? If not, I will move on. Good. So you may have heard the term above the line, below the line. They literally put the line here in this. All that means, above the line means it's part of the basic school program and it's WPU based. Below the line means that it's either part of the vote-in board or the related to basic programs. These programs are not WPU based, though some of them do, the appropriations do grow by the growth in the WPU. And that's why it's confusing, but it's just the way we operate. We don't want to keep things simple for you all. I don't know why, but that's what we do. So the charter school local replacement rate is here in the below the line. So 2701 is the value per student for charter school local replacement. And so then you can see here, these are all the programs within related to basic, and they are grouped together kind of. So there are a few groups. There's just this general catch-all group, and that includes transportation and the charter school local replacement and base funding. Then the focus populations includes things like adult ed, youth in custody, concurrent enrollment. It targets a specific population of students, usually. Educator support, so the biggest one here is the educator salary adjustment. These are funds that are meant to go essentially to directly to educators. And then the last group of programs are statewide initiatives, and this is everything from the health and counseling support program to do immersion to Beverly Taylor Sorensen and digital learning. all of these sum up to just under $1 billion. And each one has its own restrictions and requirements. In general, if funds are in the basic school program, they are less administratively burdensome for you all. They're in the related to basic program, they are more burdensome. So, you know, and there's always this kind of push and pull between, you know, legislature wants a specific thing done, they put into related to basic, but then it often maybe doesn't get spent as easily and those sort of things. So as if you're advocating for a specific thing, you might want to think about, you know, where it goes in the budget. That matters a lot. Any questions about specific programs and related to basic? We could always drill down on the COBE on that. The last one here is voted and board, and I'm going to spend just a little time on the actual calculation for this. So Tyler Newton from Wayne asked some questions. I've already been able to talk to Tyler because I wanted to get a sense of what questions he had, but I'm going to go through just a little bit on the calculations here. The voted and board basically guarantees a specific amount per tax increment, which is the 0.0001 per WPU. So this year it's 5191. And essentially they do that for 20 increments per WPU. And you can see that the total amount appropriated is just under $1 billion here. But most of this is local funding. You can see that 667 million are the funds that are property taxes that are levied by school districts, whether it has to go to a vote or the board levies it directly. There's a small program, the Reading Improvement Program, that's part of this as well. I'm going to the spreadsheet right here. Well, actually, let me go to the statute here. So 53F2601, this is the statute that directs the state portion and the funding side for this voted and board program. I'm just going to focus on paragraph 2 here, or subsection 2. Basically, let me start here. So there's a guaranteed amount in 3, I apologize. That's an actual calculation. It's this multiplier times the prior year's WPU unit, or the value of the weighted pupil unit, plus this 0.005 times the prior year's WPU unit. If you look over here, what that equals in this year is 4481. So this was kind of the base amount that we started, that this is what every WPU generates in this program. And then if there are additional funds, then we increase that. So the main question that Tyler had was, you know, how does what gets guaranteed where? And it gets complicated, and I apologize, but I didn't create this program. So, but I do have to do these calculations. If there's one thing that I would have you take home about voting board, if you deal with this program, charter school folks, you don't have to deal directly with this program and, you know, count your many blessings. So, but for those that do, if you are levying between your board and voted sides 20 increments, pretty much you get all your funding that you're going to get. I wouldn't worry too much about the specifics, but the way it works, essentially, going back to the statute, is there is kind of a waterfall of what gets funded first, but there's enough funding in the system. The legislature is very unlikely to retract that kind of funding, that it funds all of these priorities, and we can fund above the statutorily required guarantee amount. But the first 4 increments, sorry, let me go over here. The first 4 increments of the board are what get guaranteed first. Then second is the first 16 increments for voted. After that, if there are increments, if the sum, so if there are increments above 16 for voted or 4 for board, those get funded, but you get only funded up to 20 increments. And so that's, again, going back to my point that if between the two you're levying 20 increments, then don't worry about it. After that, then we can increase the guarantee amount. So I'll just show you kind of how that works. So this is that first part, those 4 increments, and then we estimate what your local contributions will be based on your 5-year average rates here. And then the difference is what the state funds. So $19 million is in this part of that. And I'm not going to go through there. So over here, you can see here's the 16 increments. Here's the difference between 16 and 2 for voted. Over here is the difference between 4 and 20 increments, excuse me. And then after that, if there are still funds left, then we can increase the guarantee rate. If you remember, the statutorily required guarantee rate is $44 this year, $44.81. But there was something like $80 million left of state funds that had been appropriated. So we were able to increase it to $51.58. And then just this last year, they wanted to complicate it again. And we increased it again for this additional source of revenue to $51.91. And that's what you saw in that appropriations report. So every increment per WPU is funded at the $51.91 this year. I know that was a lot. Questions on vote and board, hopefully, and maybe Tyler, was there something that you wanted me to cover that I didn't through that? I probably caught Tyler when.
I think you're good.
Hey Tyler.
I think you need to mention that if anyone doesn't know what their increments are, go to taxrates.utah.gov and you can see what tax rates you're charging. And an increment is just 0.0001.
That's
right?
correct. Yep. Yeah, and what you're basically held harmless at your highest rate for the last 5 years. So like, for example, Alpine here, they were, for the voted side, they were levying just under 12 increments, but then they increased that to the 16 increments in 2021. And so what they're counted for, and then will for the next while, let's say it goes down next year, is the 16 increments. That's just how it works. Thank you, Tyler. So I'm going to move off voted and board and go back and now go to the COBE here, unless there are questions about these tables. So going back here, this is budget.utah.gov, right? Here's the COBE. If you want, so if you click to the 22 session, right? So this will be for next budget year. You're not going to find a lot of information because the budget's not set. Okay. So, but if you want to see what our current year is, if you go to here, and it's a little confusing how to navigate this thing. It takes a little bit of getting used to. You have to click navigate here, and you have to know what budget year you're looking for. And so we are in fiscal year 21-22, right? So if you go to COBE archive, you have to go to fiscal year 21-22. Now you're looking at what the current budget is for this year. Okay. So make sure that you are looking at the 21-22 budget if you're looking for this year. And then again, remember, the budget is organized by these subcommittees. So you have to click public education, and then you have to know if it's part of MSP. If it's not part of MSP, I'd click State Board of Education, and then you can get to the line items. This is the main unit that's used budgetarily. If you see here, look, if you click State Board of Ed, there are a whole bunch of line items. Now, line item is not the smallest unit in the budget. Programs are, and each line item can be made up of a lot of programs. Some are not. Great. So let me use an example. So we had talked about the grades 1 through 12 program. If you click the basic school program, it will show you all of those programs that I showed you on that pie chart. So if you click grades 1 through 12 here, then it drills down. So there are 4 different tabs here. The overview provides you kind of a summary of the program. If you want the financials, these are state financials, both sources and uses. for years going back to 2017, you can have that here. So you can see how the $22.3 billion is appropriated to this program. If you want to know what the statute actually says about the calculation for grades 1 through 12, if you click background here, it will give you an overview of what the formula is, right? That's where you can go for, you know, they say it right here, and I'll show it to you in statute too, but there's the 0.55, 0.9, 0.99, and 1.2 WPUs per ADM. But it's also helpful that they give you links to the statutes where these occur for any program. So if you have, so for example, if you're like, hey, I'm dealing with an issue with the transportation program, pupil to from transportation, you have to know that it's part of related to basic. One clue again is basic school program is WPU based, related to basic is everything that's not. Transportation doesn't have WPUs in it, so that's how you know it's part of related to basic. Here's the pupil transportation to from program, right? And then here's the here are two statutes that relate to that. So you can, if you go there, then you can start to understand what, you know, okay, here, this is where that 1.5 mile rule or the 2 mile rule is in statute for transportation, for example. So going back to grades 1 through 12, so you can, I just use that as an example here. So if you click on this statute, this is where you can see, okay, here's the 0.55 for kindergarten in statute for school districts. Here are the WPU levels for charter schools that are, this is the actual guiding statute here. So I would highly recommend that you, because not only is it the funding side, but the allowable uses and, you know, Brett's side and, you know, Brett's work and Cole's work, a lot of times you can get your questions answered if you just go back to the originating statutes and look and say, what are the allowable uses for these funds? And you can do basically what they're going to do when they look at that. So going back to the COBE here. So public ed, minimum school program. This is where I'll go back to related to basic again. So if you have, let's use a charter school example now. Here's charter school local replacement, one of the important funding sources for charter schools. If you want to know, so here's that originating statute. Here is some history. If you want to know what's happened over the different sessions to charter school local replacement, you can find it here. If you want to know actual funding levels, you can find it here on the financial side. So if there are like overall state level questions about stuff, I generally bring people to the COBE. I just need to know what program that is.
Yeah, I have pretty good luck with the search COBE function over there on the right. If you're like, you thought it was in related to basic, but you're not finding it, you can type it in there and it does pretty well at finding.
Give me an example.
Let's navigate work really well too, because you can find every program listed there.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's do school-based mental health.
Okay. Well, let's do mental health. So, oh, you're right, because now it's going to bring up all the human services stuff, right? So you should be right.
If there's a dash, right.
Yeah. Oh, I was like, it looks like an equal sign, but that's because of my school-based mental health. So you see here, human services, that shows you it's not part of public ed.
I guess maybe public education or something, or you can filter it too by.
Can you do it by committee?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, committees.
But anyway.
Let's just try public education. Let's see if that. I don't.
No, yeah.
So they'll go up to the go back to COBE and go to navigate.
Yeah, because I use the navigate function. Like, all right. So Are you talking about looking for it here?
Yeah, go to public ed.
Yeah, I did. So here's the student health and
Yeah.
counseling support program.
Yeah.
See, it's calling it the wrong. Yeah. So one of the tricky things is just what do you call things? Because they're so between the legislature, the board, and the field, we often call the same program different things, and it gets really confusing. Let me show you an example here. So student health, or actually, let me show you a better example than student health. So you've heard the term OEK, right? Optional early kindergarten. They don't call it OEK for the legislature. They call it early intervention. And so I brought up here is the allotment memo. So here's Alpine, for example. One way it is helpful to know. So if you scroll down to where the first, it says MSPB, Minimum School Program Basic. So that line item that I talked about with the basic school program, these will all be part of that. And you'll see the 21 distributions, and then you see the 22. So PPPA, kindergarten, that's you know, the legislature calls it kindergarten, we call it kindergarten. But if you go down here, here's the MSPRB, the related basic. So let's find OEK. Oh, we do call it earlier intervention. Yeah. So you might, so 21 PUD, 22 PUD, right? This is early intervention, but often the field calls it OEK. And even here we call it OEK sometimes, but you have to kind of know and translate that sometimes. So again, here's the, so these are the main, there are 3 line items in the basic school program. You'll see those line items in your allotment memo. So here's related to basic, and then if you scroll to the very bottom, the voted and board is this one here. Here are the different allocations for voted and board. So I've covered that. I've covered voted and board. I've covered. That's kind of all that I was planning on covering, unless. So hopefully that can give you at least a sense. This is 80% of your funding source that you can go and answer your questions. But again, if you have questions about what happened with such and such program, like I heard that they increased funding here, you can. I did want to show you that. So I didn't go to issues here. So the issue side, these are actual budget item increases or decreases that occurred. So here's the, you know, if you want to know in 22, here's the WPU value increase, and it's kind of confusing. Actually, it's not a great example because it's broken up into multiple pieces. Let me do it. Are you gonna? You're right. So enrollment growth, for example, here. Yeah, let me just. Yeah, let me just show you. So this enrollment growth was 1 point.
Has a comment when we're done.
Okay, 1 point. So if you click issues, there's about $50 million that funded enrollment growth across the system, and that was 1.09%. Looking at year over year, so you have 673,000 students. So we grew by about 1%. That multiplier was used across multiple programs, and you can see it broken out on the public ed side to all these different programs. Okay, go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
I was just going to mention when you're talking about different namings of programs, on our chart of accounts, we try to name the programs how they are in statute.
Yeah.
It's not always the case, but that's what we try to do. So if you don't know the name, you can also use the chart of accounts as a possible resource to find out what the name is.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't think it said OEK on the allotment memo, but you know, often in our vernacular, and so like even the budget requests say often OEK, but the program itself we call it early intervention because that's what the legislature calls it.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So kind of a specific and random question, I guess, but like at risk for the enhancement of at risk. That is now an above the line, or it's the basic school program. But on the Kobe, we still have it under related to basic school program.
Yeah.
How often do we update?
Let me show you. It's actually, yeah, that's a good question. Can I show you that? And what LEA are you with?
San Juan.
San Juan. Okay. And your name?
Tyrell.
Okay. Nice to meet you. Okay. So did they add it here yet? Or did they not?
No, see, I wasn't finding it, but I found under the related to basic school programs, it's under at-risk students gang prevention.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's separate.
yeah, yeah. So here, let me show you. And this is, so to answer your question, they do a fairly good job of updating existing programs, but when they make big changes like the at-risk program, it takes them about a year to actually update the Kobe. So we could look and see in the 23 version if it's above the line. So if you see here, there's still an at-risk, there's still an EARS program, but it's only the gang prevention piece. And so if you look here, the financials, it looks like this program got whacked and like 95% of it got cut. But that was because this part, funding and more, went to above the line, like you're talking about. So I can show you where you can find it. It's a little complicated in the year when they're making this change. So if you go to issues, like I was talking about here, well, yeah, they will have, so at-risk WPU add-on and hold harmless here. This is only the small piece of that. You can see that they just threw it in the basic school program. Let's look it up in 23 and see if they've actually updated it. Because that, you would hope so. You'd hope that there's a new program called at risk or students at risk. Here you go, students at risk add-on.
Okay.
So over here, and now you can see it here, and they have it for 22.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. So that was a case where, you know, it was a big change in the budget, and so it was a huge change to two pieces there. Sometimes if it's a whole new program, they will not always add it in the current year of the Kobe.
Okay.
But they will, it will show up here. So if you look here.
Yeah, I was on the budget and it does show up as the basic school program above the line.
Yes, right,
20.
right here.
Yep.
Yep. And this report usually comes out well after the budget, usually during the summer sometime. So if you want more current information, the Kobe, they update it more continually. So usually I rely on the Kobe until this comes out, but I use both resources. Other questions? No? Forward. So please reach out to me. I know there are a lot of questions about how different calculations work throughout the year. I'm getting used to those, but certainly as I learn them, I'm happy to share with you all, and we can put it together.
Any questions on allotment memos? How to enter anything on your allotment memo? Okay. Well, let's take a 5-minute break. Rebecca can get set up. We'll stretch our legs and we'll meet back at 3:05.
Hey, everybody.
Sorry, just let me mute my.
Got matrix going on.
Okay, try now.
Better? Nope.
It's your microphone too.
Okay. Now I think we're.
Now? Okay, very good. I am Rebecca Nielsen, and I am the Utah Grants System Administrator for USBE. And I am thinking, because I've been listening to this meeting downstairs from my desk, and I'm thinking you guys have about had it for the day. So I'm going to kind of jump through my presentation pretty quickly, maybe hit some highlights, and then my presentation is available for you to look through in more detail as you have more time and energy. And feel free to always reach out to me. And I was going to say my team, but I am my own team right now. So reach out to me if you have any questions or any needs. And also today, feel free to ask me any questions during this presentation or afterward. So first and foremost, I wanted to point out where you could find resources as it relates to Utah grants. So I hope that everyone is familiar with the Utah schools.utah.gov spread or website. Oh, do I need to just say that? Say okay.
That was on mine.
Now I'm okay.
Her screen's not showing up there.
That is me.
Okay.
That is me. Okay, so schools.utah.gov website, under financial operations, so here, we have a section called Utah Grants. It's right here. And here we have links to the Utah Grants Management System, as well as all sorts of training materials regarding Utah Grants. So feel free to peruse around here. Go here to answer any of the questions that you have or your staff has, or feel free to give us a call. I have all of my contact information within my slides, which I believe, Sam, you're going to distribute after the training. Yes? Okay, perfect. Or my name is Rebecca Nielsen at schools.utah.gov if you want to just email me directly. Okay, so jumping into the slide presentation, I think I have to change what is presenting here. So 1 second. Here we go. All right. So Utah Grants. Utah Grants is the system that we, USBE, and all of our LEAs utilize for grants management. It is a fairly new system. We are on the 4th year, and we keep adding new capabilities to the system. Most recently, I believe either Cole or Neil or both mentioned the site visit capability that we've recently added. So we're managing our site visits within the Utah Grant system. We're also managing our risk assessments within Utah Grants, managing our annual assurances, any applications, payment requests, awards. I'll go through all of that detail in this presentation kind of at a high level, just so you know what you can find in Utah Grants. The idea is that we have one consolidated system for all of our grants management needs so that we're not utilizing multiple different systems. Most of you, because you're new, will not know what we came from, which was multiple different systems or multiple different processes within different sections within USBE for managing grants, and then turning in paper reimbursement requests, and it was kind of really discombobulated and kind of a mess. So it's really nice to have one consolidated system that we can utilize for all of our grants management needs, and be consistent in that effort. Okay, so again, here's the link on where you can find Utah Grants. We have different types of users and different types of access within the system, and there's some definite separations or controls built into the system. So many of you will already know, if you've used the system at all, that there are creators within Utah Grants and there are approvers within Utah Grants. And anything that you submit to the USBE has to go through those dual steps. So we always know that anything that's been submitted, whether it be an application or a reimbursement request, has been viewed by two different individuals at the LEA level. So one has created it, another has approved it. So that helps us with making sure that internal controls have been met on your end and that not one individual is doing everything. And I know that sometimes that can be a pain when you have to get those dual approvals, but we do the same thing on the USBE side. We make sure that we have sometimes more than just dual. Sometimes I think we have 4 different approval steps that we have to take because we are a government organization. So we like to have lots of built-in bureaucracy. Oh, did I say that out loud? But no, built-in controls. So that's a good thing. If you have any questions about your access that you have within Utah Grants or what type of a user you are, or if we need to switch user types, you can reach out to me and I can help you get things switched around or answer any questions with that. Okay, I need to figure out how to switch screens easier. Okay, I mentioned that this was our consolidated system for all of Utah or all of our grants management. So anywhere from creating programs, from like what Dale was talking about, all of our funding sources come in through Utah Grants, including all of our MSP funding. It's all flowing through the Utah Grants management system. Applications, review of those applications, award management, reimbursement management, site visits, and post-award management, all handled in the Utah Grants management lifecycle. All right, is everyone familiar with Utah Grants? Everyone's been in? Yeah? So this should be fairly familiar to you all. I want to just kind of give you a couple of hints and tricks that if you haven't already picked up on, that may help you in your navigation in Utah Grants. The very top menu bar that you'll see here that's kind of circled in landscape, that's where you're always going to want to start in Utah Grants. I kind of refer to it as the hat. So put on the hat first, figure out what you're going to be doing. Are you applying for grants? You're going to be going to applications. Are you monitoring grants? Then you're going to go into the monitoring section. So you'll always start at the top and then you'll go to the left and find what you need to do either on the left or in the table that's below. But always figure out what you're doing first. Start at the top with what hat you're wearing and then go either to the left or to the table in the content. And then I have also kind of given you a quick tips on what you can find in each of these little tabs in the home, opportunities, applications tabs. So you don't have to jump around. You can kind of come to this little table and know what you can find and where. Some helpful icons that you'll see. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but some tips and tricks. Make sure that you're saving often, especially as you're navigating through different tabs and screens. And then also with the sharing rule, once you become an owner of an application, you are that owner, or an owner of a reimbursement request. You are the owner. In order to make the switch to somebody else becoming an owner, you'll have to give me a call or call the Utah Grants help desk support line. So be really careful when you own or accept ownership of an application or a reimbursement request that you really are the one that wants to finish that completely and submit it for internal approval. That's probably my number one help desk ticket, is changing that ownership. So we can change it. It'd be helpful if you just pay attention, make sure that you really do want that to be yours and you want to see it through before you accept that task. As we are getting more and more mature and getting more and more programs, awards within Utah Grants, the search functionality has become really helpful. So I wanted to point out that it does have a robust search function within Utah Grants. If you click on the magnifying glass, you can really search anything very easily. Also, the little filter button, you can search by multiple parameters. Anything that you see on the screen is searchable. Also, all of the headings and titles within the tables are sortable. So if you click on the heading, you can sort A to Z or Z to A. If you click on it twice, it'll reverse. So that helps a little bit with navigation. Okay, a couple key terms. Program, Dale talked a lot about the programs. That's essentially the funding, what it is that we're doing with the funding. And then we have an announcement, and that's typically us letting you know that there's some funding available. You can go out and complete the program requirements and apply for that funding. So some of our programs require applications, whereas others do not. Many of our minimum school programs do not require applications. They're just minimum school programs, and they're guaranteed programs. However, like all of our federal programs, you have to meet requirements, complete an application before those can be funded. So an announcement is how we do that application. Once the application is fully approved, then the system will issue a grant, And the grant is essentially your award. It tells you you have money to spend. Here's the parameters in which you can spend it. Gives you all of the details on how that money is to be spent and when it should be spent. An award, they're within Utah grants, the terms are a little bit confusing, but within a grant, there could be multiple awards. So if we amend a grant, you could have like 2 or 3 different awards under that grant. So if you have a special education title or special education flow through, what do you call IDEA? That's the word I'm looking for. Flow through 22 FTFL, and you get half of your funding at the beginning of the year. We may amend that, and so that therefore you'll have one grant, but 2 different awards. The initial award will have the initial allocation for half of the award, and then the second award will be for your full allocation. You may ultimately have more awards after that if we have other changes that need to come across. So just as far as terminology goes, grant is, there's only one, awards there could be multiple. Okay, tasks are created when an action is required from the user, so pay attention to your tasks within Utah grants. Tasks are specific to that little heading area. So you will have tasks under your applications, you will have tasks under your monitoring tab, you may have tasks under your grants. So one thing that we put into place, it's been about a year, is on the home tab, and I can kind of show you that in a minute. On the home tab, it will show you all of your tasks based on module. So I will show you that. Before it didn't do that. You had to go to each different tab to find out what your tasks were. But I will show you on the home tab, there's a little dashboard that shows you all of your tasks by module. Budget revisions, so that can occur at any time with our IDEA funds. We will require a budget revision when we increase the award amounts. And then an amendment will create a new award as discussed. Okay, we have different pathways. As mentioned, MSP funding will run through the Utah grant system, but will not require an application. Some of our MSP funding does require an application, but does that not then require a reimbursement request. So we have different modules that kind of differentiate, or pathways that differentiate the way the funding goes to the LEA. So a few things that, that are different within the Utah grant system would be the application, if an application is required or not, and reimbursement, if reimbursement is required or not. So we will pick the pathway based on the program requirements. Formula grant, for example, would be all of our federal funding. So federal funding is always going to require an application, and it's always going to require a reimbursement request. So much of our well, all of our federal funding will go through formula. We also have a few competitive applications where you can put in a competitive bid or compete for specific grants. And I'll show you how those differentiate from some of our formula applications. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple of these pretty quickly. Okay, profile management. So within Utah grants, one thing that we probably could do a better job of is managing the users within the system. So after a certain amount of time goes by, I think right now it's between 9 months and a year, I will inactivate any users that have not been within the Utah grants, have not been active within the system for your LEA. I'll just automatically inactivate them. But if you'll go in and follow this little pathway here, so go in from the home screen, go into your, I think that says manage organization profile, and look at your users and just make sure all of those individuals are still with your LEA. And then also double check and see if there are others that need to be added. So I will never delete any users because we need to maintain history, but I will inactivate them if they haven't used Utah grants or if they've left, if you've notified me that they've left. So we do pay for licenses within Utah grants, so or within the USBE. So we recommend that you only have the number of licenses that you need, but we want to make sure that you have those licenses that you need. We definitely don't want to keep someone on if they're no longer with your LEA. But just okay. So for applying for funding, again, just really quickly, you're going to do that in the applications section. And you're always going to start by looking at your pending tasks. So all of the applications will appear in the main table, like if you can see my cursor right here. all of your applications will appear here. However, if you go to applications and then pending tasks, you'll see a little play or green triangle. That's how one individual has to start the application process. And this is where I tell you that I get the most support tickets to change that owner. So make sure that when you click on that little play symbol, that little green button, a little warning will pop up and say, if you're going to click on this, you're going to become the owner of this application. Are you sure? If you say yes, then you are the owner of that application. You can call, but be careful on that one. You can go in just from applications and click on the little green eye at any time to look at the application, to see what it is, to see if it really is yours or who it belongs to. But that little arrow, the green play button, is what makes it yours. Okay. Competitive applications are a little bit different. With the formula applications, we've actually created an application in draft form for you because we typically have an allocation. So we start the application and give you an amount that application needs to be. With competitive applications, you get to pick how much you're going to need for that application. So we have to go in and create your own application. So you'll have to express an interest in that opportunity for funding, and you'll do that here. So in opportunities instead of applications. And there's detailed instructions on all of this within that website that I pointed to at the very first, but just so you know why it's different for a competitive application versus a formula application. And then, as mentioned, risk assessments are now within Utah Grants, and they are done at the application stage. So if your program has a risk assessment associated with it, it will be completed by whoever is completing that application at the time of application. And then oftentimes the risk assessment will be graded or reviewed after the application is actually approved. It's not part of the approval process, but it's something, once all of the applications come in, we compare all of those answers and make sure that we assess the risk on that program. Okay, post-award management. Wanted to point out that within the grants tab, this is where you're going to find all of your award information. So you'll go to the grants tab and search for your award, and then on the third tab over, there's a button that says awards. If you click on the green eye next to that award, it will actually bring up your award letter. So if you have any questions about, like if you need to provide that to an auditor, or if you have need like a single document, your award letter document, you can find that right there. Okay, reimbursement requests are found in the monitoring tab. So monitoring would be anything that would be considered post-award. So after the award is given, you can then seek reimbursement requests. So that's done here. As we get more awards, it's probably easiest for you to find your program that you need to seek reimbursement for by using the search box. And you're doing the reimbursement request at the individual award level. Again, grants are one, awards could be multiple, but there's only one active award at any given time. So if you're searching for level 2, level 1 is the high level or grant level, level 2 is the award level. So when you do your search here, go to level 2 and it will take you right to the award. Okay, and then once you're in, you can actually see, this is really small, but up here on the left, it says award view, and it gives you the title of the program. If you're in award view, the third tab over is requests, and you can click on the new reimbursement request right there, and that's how you will initiate a reimbursement. You can also waive your funds from this screen. So if you're not going to utilize those funds, you can go ahead and waive those so they could be used elsewhere. A couple of things as far as timing. Please, please, please submit your reimbursements on a timely basis as soon as you can. We have had problems in the past where LEAs have waited until the end of the fiscal year or even the end of the grant to submit the reimbursement request. And that makes it really hard for us, USBE, to manage the funds that are available. And oftentimes those funds go unutilized. So we aren't able to redistribute those to other LEAs if we have to wait until the end of the grant period. So either waive your funds if you know you're not going to use them, or turn in your reimbursement request timely so that we can kind of monitor and make sure that those funds are being used. And we actually had an audit finding a year or two ago about the timeliness of those reimbursement requests. Our auditors want to make sure that we are paying you on a regular basis. So we would like to do that too. We can't do that unless you submit a reimbursement request. So please get those turned in. Okay. Also with, yeah.
The cutoff date is the 10th.
Oh, yes. Typically it's there is a calendar out on that website. It's typically the 8th working day or something. Tracy's been sending out a monthly email saying that when they're due that month. I'll start doing that until my position's filled. But yeah, it's typically like 8 working days or the 10th day of the month or somewhere in there. So, and that gives the USBE time to go through all of the approvals, send it back to you if necessary, and answer any questions, and then get it fully approved so that's on your allotment memo at the end of the month. Site visits were also discussed today. Those can also be found in the monitoring tab. We're just now starting to utilize that functionality within Utah Grants, and it's pretty robust. And as we start rolling that out more often and start using it more frequently, we'll do more in-depth trainings on that. And in fact, I was looking through my list of training documents. I don't even have a training put together for this one. So that's one of my to-dos. I'll work on that. But as your fiscal monitors start coming out, we'll utilize this system to collect all of the documentation for that site visit or desk review. Yeah.
Is this the space to request a visit?
No, no. How would they go about doing that, Cole?
Probably just send us an email and we'll see if we can fit you in.
Have in mind that we are resource limited when it comes to fiscal monitoring, and there's about 158 OEAs in the state. Sure. Oftentimes there's 1 or 2 program fiscal monitors assigned to a program, and so we have to prioritize our higher risk and OEAs over requested visits. Sure. But there, yes, you can ask that.
But we do have also myself and Tony and Alfretti offer what we call CATS administration or CATS training. So Tyrell's LEA, we're working with them to do some compliance administration training. So if you want some of that, you can also reach out to me, and it'll be more general than a specific program like special ed or whatnot, but we can do that as well. So cool. Happy at any point to meet with any of you.
So this is just the portal to upload.
Right. So it'll be initiated by USBE. So when there is a site visit, you'll be notified through this portal, or you'll get an email, and then it will direct you to this portal to come in and upload all of your documents. And then if there is, I think that's actually my next slide. So you'll receive notification. You'll gather all of your documentation and attach it within Utah Grants. The site visit or desk review will be performed by Cole, Neil, and their team. And then after, I didn't put that slide in. At that point, they will assess if there's any findings or outcomes from that site visit. And we'll track all of that within this module too. So if there are items that need follow-up, or there are findings that need to be have corrective action, then all of that will be managed within that module as well. Does that help? Okay, perfect. Last tab within the Utah Grant system is this little pie chart or analytics tab. And I wanted to make sure that you knew that this was there. There are a few canned reports that you have access to here, as well as a grants summary report here. So make sure that you're coming out here and seeing what's available as far as reporting is concerned. And those reports are customizable. Once you're into them, you can filter them and download them into Excel. It's actually really helpful information. Okay, again, this is the website where all of the training materials are posted and where you can get to Utah Grants. And here is how you would reach me or my team. So, any questions? Yes.
So as I've been through the site, we have several grants that show we still have outstanding funding, but they're old grants. They're from like 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure we don't actually have funding.
Right.
We've also received a couple of budget revisions, but these again are a couple of years ago. grants, is there a way to clean that up or?
That would be on our plate. In fact, we are working on cleaning those up. They need to be closed out from our perspective.
Okay.
So yes, for right now, ignore them. But if, as the funding expires, we should be closing them out so that they're not muddying the waters for you.
Okay.
If you do see something that, you know, it just continues to build and get in your way, send me an email and I'll reach out to the program managers and we'll work with them to get those specific programs moved to the top of the list of getting them closed out. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered if I needed to do something.
No, that's initiated on our end. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of grants that we were given indirect funding, like we weren't given a choice to take it or not. It just showed up, $14,000 in direct costs. We don't opt into indirect costs. So do we need to submit like a budget revision to have those?
So let me pop over here and show you indirect costs. So let me see if I can change screens here.
That's not something anyone else is dealing with.
No, this is a really good question. This is a really good question. So give me 1 second to.
So very detailed. So while she's looking, I can kind of explain. Indirect costs are calculated in the year of the application. However, if you have a grant program that has a 27-month period of availability, and the subsequent year after you apply, you don't have indirect costs calculated, you won't be able to recoup those, but it has a category because in the year of application, you did have indirect costs.
She's never had it.
Our school's never taken them in 15 years, so that's why we're confused by this.
So double check here. So from the home screen,
Okay.
go into your managed organization profile. And I'm currently in Jordan School District right now, so just so you know what you're looking at. And if you scroll down, there's all of my users. Here's the USBE specific indirect cost rates. We have unrestricted indirect cost rates and restricted indirect cost rates. So look here to see if you have any rates listed in any of those years, because chances are you probably have a rate listed in a year and that's trying to apply that to the program. Which school are you with?
Paradigm.
Paradigm. And do you know what? Let me get in. Let's just find out. This is good stuff. Do this together. My screen looks a little bit different than what you're seeing, so just kind of bear with me. Are you okay with me putting this up on the screen? And this is also part of training being recorded, so you're okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Rebecca has all the power.
I do have all of the power. Except that I cannot see my screen because I have a button in front of this on my own screen I can't see. There we go. Here we go. I can see it now. So yes, you do have indirect costs in fiscal year 2020. You didn't opt for indirects in 21 or 22, but you did in 2020. So like was just mentioned, depending on the year of funding, it could be trying to apply that rate.
I asked the former business administrator, and she just said we'd never taken them, so I don't know if that was.
Yeah, it looks like
they at least.
it looks like you did from 20 and earlier.
You know, the tool filled it out. Yeah, use the tool
I
to
don't
get a
know.
rate, but they may not have, applied them to any grants.
Okay. So the question is, if we're not taking them this year, do I need to put in budget revisions for the couple of grants that are showing indirect costs?
No, so they'll budget for them based on the fiscal year of the funding source, but when you go in to put your reimbursement request in, if you say your reimbursement is from fiscal year 22, it will look at this line for 22. So it will look at this line and say you have a 0% indirect cost rate for 22, and it will apply 0. And the budget comparison does not look at indirect costs when it's comparing budget, so you should be okay. If it reaches some type of an error or something, which sometimes it does, call me and we'll fix it. Okay. Okay, good questions. Other questions?
I have a question while we're on the topic of indirect rates, and I don't know if this is a you question, Rebecca, or if it's a Dale question.
but I have a grant with an award letter that has it says that it's subject to the unrestricted rate and shows the rate that we can apply to that grant. But on the 2022 indirect cost type schedule, it's saying that it's not applicable for that specific grant.
That would be a problem that Brett and I need to talk about. So if you could point the program to me, then we can look at that and see if the schedule needs to be updated or if we published it wrong in Utah Grants. But yeah, so Brett is the one that puts the schedule together, and then I'm the one that puts it into Utah Grants. But sometimes there's a mismatch, so we can, because we're human, but we can look at that.
Okay, I'll shoot you an email then with that specific.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
All right, other questions for Rebecca? I do have one more specific technology question too. I get the email notifications when like a reimbursement has been approved or when a grant award letter comes through, but I do not get any email notification when like internally somebody submits something for internal approval for me. Is that something that I need to talk with my own technology department, or is that something on the Utah Grants end? Because it would be nice to be able to receive an email notification saying, hey, this
it could be either. The fact that you're getting emails at all tells me it's probably not your IT that is blocking the web address from coming through. So it makes me wonder, but I also am not hearing this from other people, so that has me a little bit confused. But
so it actually shows up in my spam. It doesn't come in my inbox.
So it does, okay.
So I do get, like, I'm getting an email in the spam folder that says, you know, this application was submitted for internal approval.
Okay, then that might be an IT question.
My IT.
Yeah.
Right. I just found that out last week, because I was thinking I just wasn't getting them at all, and I found them in my spam.
It is in spam, yeah.
Okay, I'll talk to them. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I thought I was going to take a lot less than my 30-minute allotment, so I'm sorry, guys.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh,
muting,
stop.
And then I'll
Yes.
And
I'll
I will quickly. Thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate you. Yeah, so quickly I want to demonstrate a couple of board financial reports. This one is from Nevo. Thanks for the tacit approval there, Jesse and Michael. But yeah, there's not necessarily a rule on the format or what you can show. If you're a school district with different funds, you ought to have, you know, probably a general and an overall display of your budget. In Nevo's case, they're displaying an adopted budget and a working budget. You can absolutely do that. You know, some LEAs may want to say this was our original, you know, back in the summer, this was our original budget, and then another column for our currently adopted budget if you've already updated it. And then you do need to show your expenditures and revenues against that budget. And so make sure that you are doing that for every board meeting, that you're keeping up with that. But again, the format is kind of up to you. Again, they've got so they've got some programs within their general fund here. I apologize. But here's our school activities fund. Again, they've got their adopted and working budgets, and then they haven't had any receipts or expenditures in that. So they're showing the balance and the percentage. So just make sure that you are, make sure that you are providing that for each of your funds. If you're a charter, you're only going to have the one fund, but provide the level of detail that the board needs to make decisions. And let me, sorry, on your eyes here, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. There's their child nutrition fund, but here's, like I mentioned, they're all funds kind of combined, financial budget versus actual report. This is a really helpful, at the end of a period to say this is a percentage of the fiscal year that's expired is 42%. The percentage of school year that's expired is 43%. And then, if you have percentage of the entire budget that's been expended at this point, and whether you're, sorry, I went the wrong, to bring my mouse and it's my office still, apologize. but those are helpful metrics for the board to look at, and kind of to explain some of those. So that's a NEBO specific report. I believe this one is from Alpine. And I apologize, page 52 is where I want to be. So I chose districts that I had a connection with. I have a kindergartner in Alpine, and I graduated from NEBO at Payson High School. So anyway, but just so something that Alpine does that you could consider is kind of some bullet points. They call it budget changes of interest. Whether you want to present that as part of your presentation as the BA to your board, or whether you want to write them down and put them in the board backups is really up to you. But I think this is, maybe could be a best practice for lots of LEAs. Again, just speak with your board leadership and see what they want you to provide. I think some of the board reports that are provided are because the BA has a lot of experience and knows what their board expects, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't make improvements or make changes. Again, the most important thing is that you're showing the percentage of budget expended by line item, but some of these things that could be very helpful for your board members, you may want to consider including. So in this one, Alpine does it kind of summatively, so they add November, and then they're keeping October, so the board can kind of easily go back and see what we've added or changed at those points in time. So just an easy way to keep your board up to date. If we get our second half IDA allocation and it's 1% more than we thought it would be, or whatever change to grants that you have, whatever change to, you had planned to make a big expenditure and it ended up 2% less than you expected. Some of those things you can put here. And they've called out their superintendent discretionary use, just because probably that's what their board wants to do there. They provide a certified hiring report, classified hiring report, and some other things there as well. But again, some of those things are board preference. Let me show you one that I'm showing this one because I was roommates with their board chair in college. So this is Voyage Academy in Clinton. And this is just attached to their board agenda. So anyway, so they've got a pretty, if it were me, I might consider, anyway, they've got a pretty good summary here on the top left. They've got these financial metrics that maybe are a little more relevant in the charter world than the district world. Those aren't a requirement, but they're nice to have. And this is quite a nice report for a board member to look at, a nice sort of dashboard. So some things to consider, whether or not they're required, but just kind of taking into account your time and again your board's preference and what they use to make their decisions. I could see a situation where you spend hours and hours and hours creating some reports, and if the board's never looking at it, I'm not advocating that you don't include the necessary information, but if it's kind of extra and they're really not looking at it, then maybe you kind of have a frank discussion with them to say, hey, it doesn't feel like you guys are using this. Can I put it in a different format? And again, a charter school might be tracking their enrollment towards, October, a lot closer in some cases, or just some helpful charts here. But again, this is what they really need to have is their year-to-date budget amounts, their year-to-date actual expenditures and revenues, so that the board has that information and the public as well. So questions, or again, that's just 3 LEAs out of 150 plus. So again, the format, the display of it isn't always a necessarily have to be one way or another, but those are just some examples there. Any questions about monthly board reports? Anybody want to show theirs because you think yours are great? We already showed yours, Newell, so if anybody else wants to volunteer. But if you do have something a template or something you'd like to share, be happy to share that with other BAs as that comes up. So, and again, a lot of LEAs have different accounting systems. It's okay if yours looks a little bit different than that, as long as you have that required information of apprising your board of your current financial situation. So thank you for whoever, I forget to give credit to whoever asked that question, but that's there. So anyway, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you, and I remember 5 years ago being a new BA and feeling very, just felt like I was drinking from the fire hose a lot. And I cannot express enough gratitude to Cole and Rebecca. I didn't ever talk to you too much as a BA, but Deputy Superintendent Jones and Brett Balthazar, the people that have been here at USPD. And, I'm committed to trying to provide you that same level of service and support. Just reach out to us. If I spend 8 hours on the phone with you one day, I call that day a success, hopefully, unless it's, you've got something burning down. But, if we're just training on things that help you in your position, that help your schools, that help your kids at your schools, that's why I wanted to ask, that question at the beginning of what's your favorite program at your LEA. Is I try, it's easy to get hung up in the weeds of all of our funding formulas and all these things, but I really try and we try to get our team to think about individual kids that we're affecting. Neil has a student with special needs, and my 5-year-old doesn't have anything diagnosed yet, but she's given her kindergarten teacher some gray hairs, that's for sure. And I try to think about those impacts to individual students and teachers and schools and communities. So hang in there. but reach out. We a lot of times have a resource or a template or something or somebody in an LEA that's similar to yours, that we can connect you with. So I anyway, we're here for you. We want to share some of those things. Are there any best practices? I wanted to give you a little bit of time to share any best practices or softwares that you can't live without, or things that you do to keep yourself even keeled and balanced and not lose your mind. I'll start with, I go to the float spa about once a month, and some people hate it, but an hour floating in a dark place in 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt really does a lot for me. So I don't know if there's anything that anybody wants to share with the group on just the ways that you keep up with all your duties, or things that make your life easier. Todd, what software do you use for your task management? ClickUp. And that's free, right? There's a free version.
Paid versions, but for yourself, it's free.
Never misses anything because he puts it all in there and it reminds them. And
you can also use Microsoft To Do, and you can drop your Outlook emails right in. So it'll keep the attachments and everything right in there.
So, anybody else?
I work a couple hours after everyone else goes home. I get so much more done.
Hey,
I come in late on Mondays and stay late on
I've definitely pulled a few Saturdays, and those are so productive sometimes, for sure. Yeah, I'm not advocating that you work every weekend, but maybe take a Monday off and then work a Saturday or something. But awesome. So, I just don't want any of you to feel like you're on an island. It can be, you might be getting pressure from staff and from your board and your family saying, hey, when are you coming home? Don't feel like you're on an island, because we get it. We've been there, and we want to help you. And every time there's been something that's been frustrating or slow, or there's been a solution of some sort, right? Whether that was software or whether that was, just kind of organizing my day a little bit better. But did you have something during?
Oh, you had just training in addition to the new.
Yeah, we would absolutely love it to come to your LEA and meet with you individually. If you'd like that, you could give us 4 or 5 topics. We could do that. With Tyrell, I think it's been a while, so I need to look back at our agenda, but we've got some topics there ready to cover. Tony Onofrietti and Tony's our grants compliance officer. So just kind of some general on uniform guidance and things like that. But if it's, hey, I need a lot of help with coding, I'm just, can you walk me through some of these? Let's do that. Let's set something up, whether it's just an hour a week for 4 weeks of a Teams call with Brett Baltazar and I, or somebody on his team, or whatever whatever works for your schedule. But definitely reach out. I hate for anybody to feel like they're on an island and they don't have support, because it's there. It's sometimes as a new VA, you don't know what question to ask, right? But yeah, I definitely just, if you just need a call and vent, call me. Because like I say, I get it. And I don't always have all the answers, but I'll find somebody that does, and we'll get it figured out. So Yeah, really appreciate all of you being here. Feel free to share any of those things. Any off the top of your head, does anybody have additional training requests right away? Schedule another one of these. We are going to do a for all the LEAs another business administrator training in the spring, usually kind of after we have the legislative session wrapped up and have the budget. We'll do another training for everybody, but if you wanted to schedule another new BA training, we could absolutely do that. If you wanted it to be more of everybody bring your laptop and, you know, I need help with QuickBooks, or I need help with Alio, or, you know, we can do those sorts of things as well. We just want to be a resource for you and make it as good of an experience as it can be. So, anyway. Well, thanks. We're gonna adjourn 4 minutes early unless anybody else has questions or feedback. Anything from those of you online? Okay. Well, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you all soon. And again, just reach out. I put my cell phone there in the chat. It's also on my email signature. If you've gotten an email from me, if there's anybody in your LEA that's not getting emails that they need to get, just reach out and we'll get them added to the list. But thanks all, and we'll talk to you soon.